and it's glad to have you. I'm glad to have you all here. My name is Omotayo Olasoji, and I'm the operations manager here at Wetech, and I'll be your host today for the product design workshop. And it's glad to see we're all here, and while others are joining, let me just give you a bit introduction. We are joined today by two incredible speakers. We have Ariyike Adetimehin. She's a senior product designer at Moniepoint. And we also have Debbie Adejumo. She's a senior product designer at PolicyMe. And they'll be walking us through important topics like crafting strong case studies, how to stand out in the job market, and how to grow and perform well in your design role. Before I hand it over to them, because they're already in the room right now with us, let's just keep it rolling in the chat. You can tell me your name, where you're joining in from. For example, my name is Omotayo, and I'm currently joining in from Lagos, Nigeria. The weather is very hot today, and I'm glad there's light. So you can just say your name, where you're joining in from, and how you're feeling today. Are you ready for this class? Let me know how excited you are for this class or this workshop. And while you're at it, you can go ahead and share your LinkedIn profile so you can connect with other designers here. We've got over 80 designers who registered for this workshop, and they'll also be joining it today. So it's a great chance to connect and meet someone new. Okay, let me just check the chat, see what's going on. Okay. Hi, Christine, and thank you for joining. Wow, that's nice. Thank you for joining from Port Harcourt. And okay, yes, hi, Anita. Thank you for joining from Ghana. Yes. And hi, Grace, my Lagos friend. Hi. Hi, Ochi. Hi, Mary. Hi, Didi. Hi, everyone. So while this is going, let me allow our speakers, Ariyike and Debbie, to come on and start their presentation.
Yeah. Hi everyone, and good morning. Well,
Hi.
for joining from this side of the world, good morning, and good day to everyone else from other places. Like Omotayo shared, I'm Ari, and I'm here with Debbie, who is my co-founder and friend from Marble Studio, and we're very happy and excited to be here with you. And so I'll just share my screen and get started with the presentation. All right. So like Omotayo shared, this is a Design Your Career presentation, right? And the reason why we decided to do this was because we believe that, you know, you can never have too much help, too much support with crafting as the ideal process for job applications, portfolios, and the like. Taking out, is there somebody with their mic?
You can read that one now.
Sorry, can we make sure that everybody has their mics off?
Make sure you are muted.
I know, but then I'll just pay for it.
Okay, I'm going around to use anyone who's talking, but you can continue, right?
Okay. Yeah. So to kick us off, I'll be walking you through the agenda for today. And then we will So our agenda for today looks like this, right? We have, let me minimize this. So we have welcome and introduction, which is what is happening right now. And then we'll go into the first session, which is crafting a standout portfolio. And we're going to do that for roughly about 15 minutes. And then we'll go on a short break so that everybody can, take their time to rest. And then we move into session 2, which is a session standing out in the job
now.
market.
Well,
And then we'll take you through another break, after which we do our final session, which is on thriving in your new role. So this essentially focuses on the 3 phases of, finding yourself a job, a role, the pre-stage when you're planning and prepping, during with the interviews and the case studies and the all of that, and then after you've gotten the role, what should you do? What should that look like? And then we'll end with a final Q&A. Excited to share with you guys that there's something to look forward to for each of these sections. We have prepared little documents that you can use, some checklists, some guides to help you with, taking actionable steps as we walk you through this process. And they will be available at different points during this class today. So I will hand it over to Debbie, who will share the rest of this introduction with you guys.
All right, thanks, Ariyike. And hello, everyone. Really great to be here. We have a long session ahead, but Ariyike and I are super excited about it. So before we begin, it's good that you know a bit more about us beyond our current full-time roles. So I think the part that you know so far is that we're both senior product designers. We have over 6+ years of experience in the design industry, that's individually. But aside from that, Ariyike and I actually go way back. So we both studied computer science in undergrad. We were both in the same university, and that's where we became friends. And then right after university, we started our own design studio, which helped a lot of different startups, tech companies across Nigeria, Kenya, the US, different countries in different parts of the world. And we've also been designing, like I mentioned, so we've designed with different companies as full-time designers on their teams as well. And the reason we share this context is because we plan on bringing in our diverse perspectives across these different roles into the workshop and into the things that we'll be sharing, because we've been privileged to have these different perspectives, whether it's building your own company and hiring people for that, or interviewing to get a full-time job and to land a role in the design industry. Or even pivoting into the design industry, because like I said, it's computer science we studied first. And so those are the different lenses that we took when we were curating resources for this workshop. And we hope that, you'll find it useful regardless of which segment of design you're in. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping points to note. I'll just ask Ariyike to move on to the next slide. All right, so if you don't mind taking a few minutes to scan the QR code there, that is going to be an open platform where if you'd like to ask questions anonymously, you can do that there. I'll also drop a link to that in the chat shortly. But yeah, feel free to use that for any anonymous questions, but feel free to also use the chat box here directly to send in your thoughts, feedback, questions, suggestions, whatever you want. We're hoping that this will be as interactive as possible. Feel free to share. And the first thing to note is there's no such thing as a dumb question, because if you're thinking about it, there's probably someone else in this room that also has the same thought, also has the same question. I guess that's the only way we learn, if we ask questions. So please feel free to speak your mind or to ask clarifying questions if there are things we've said that you don't fully understand or even don't fully agree with. I think that's fair as well. Use the chat freely, like I mentioned, drop your questions there, drop any points to note there, any tech issues there. Let's keep that chat box active. And then finally, expect some practical takeaways. So one thing that we were very intentional about is making sure that whatever we share from our background, there's a way for you to practically apply it today. So we have some checklists for you, we have some guides for you. We also have a few examples of practical things that you can actually do. If there are some things that feel a bit vague, again, use the chat to tell us, how can I apply it in this context? I think context is everything. A lot of resources we see out there is heavily focused on the West, where design principles are followed and applied. But like sometimes when you're designing in a startup scene or like in some countries, design is not as prioritized. So what do you do in those cases? Those are valid questions to ask, and we'll be glad to share what we feel has worked for us. Yeah, so feel free to scan the link if you haven't already. I'll share the link again in the chat shortly, but yeah, I think we are good to go.
All right, thank you, Debbie. So getting started with our first session, which is on creating a standout portfolio. What makes a compelling portfolio? So in my opinion, and in Debbie's opinion as well, what makes a compelling portfolio is three things. A compelling portfolio achieves three things. The first thing it does is that it has a strong hook. So think of it as an elevator pitch. You have very few seconds to capture your reader's attention. Most recruiters, most hiring managers are looking at thousands of applications. There's not enough time for them to, look through it all, and they're spending the barest minimum of time. So it should hook them as soon as they open it up. So it should have a strong hook. The second thing is that it should tell a powerful and cohesive story. Aim to use the smallest number of words, smallest amount of images, again, because you have very limited time. The goal is to tell your hiring manager why they need to hire you. Everything else is a plus. Everything else is an addition. And that brings me to the third thing. It should be a clear highlight reel. What I mean by this is that it should highlight exactly why people should hire you. It should highlight exactly what you contributed specifically to the projects that you have put in your portfolio. And at every point in time, as you look through, you should ask yourself context questions. Is this important? Should I be sharing this at all? What is this telling the hiring manager? What is this telling people? If you find that you cannot give yourself a clear answer for what this section of your portfolio, what this paragraph of your portfolio will achieve for the people looking at it, then chances are it probably doesn't need to be there. I think a mistake that a lot of us make is that because we've done so much work and we want to make sure that people see like the depth of thoughts that has gone into it, and we also want to show that we have spent a lot of time working on this, we know what we're doing. We then tend to use the portfolio as a huge knowledge dump. We just take everything that we've worked on and like just offload it and put it on the portfolio, which then makes it really difficult for people who are trying to skim through. And those people are your actual target audience. You're not doing this to show off to people. You're not doing this for your friends to let them know, I really know product design. You're doing this for people who want to hire you, and those people have barely any time to spend on your portfolio. So you need to optimize it for them. That is a compelling portfolio. Again, it does three things. It has a strong hook, tells a cohesive story, and it's very clear. Now, storytelling is very important for your portfolio, because the story that you tell in your portfolio eventually ties into the rest of your application. And we'll touch a bit on that later on. We'll touch on, how it ties into your online personality, how it ties into your resume and all of that. But this is where it starts. Your portfolio is one of the first few places that any hiring manager will contact you, like will be a contact point for them. So that's one of the first few places where they will get to experience who you are, not just the work that you've done, but who you are, the way you think, and all of that. Like I just mentioned, your case study should not be a laundry list of the things you did during the project. It's not the time to, do just a thought dump and just put everything. If you've ever watched any good movie that you liked, one of the things that made it as great as it was is that there was a setup. We started understanding the context of what's going on. If you have a main character, which most movies or TV shows do, we get to understand, okay, this is where they are at right now. This is the place that they are at in their life. These are the issues surrounding them. If this person is someone that has issues maybe with their family, maybe they have an unsavory relationship with their mother or their father, we get to understand the context within this character, where this character exists, where they live in the world, and how that affects, their outlook on life and all of that. And then the writers and the director and the everything, they take us through the journey of that person. We start to see how their lives are set up around, that context, what they do, the actions they make, the decisions they take, and where that leads them. And then if you are a fan of rom-coms, there's something called like a third act breakup, where things are going very well, boy meets girl, and they hit it off, and maybe sometimes they even start dating, and then somewhere very close to the end, you're apprehensive because now these people have gotten together too early. We still have like 30 minutes of this movie left. What's going to happen? It's because 10-15 minutes to the end of the movie, somebody's going to break up with somebody. There's conflict there, something happens. They need to address the conflict. They need to walk through the problems and come out on the other side. And then we end with the movie where everybody is happy, everybody gets the ending that they want. Well, in the movies that have good endings, everybody ends up with where they want to be and all of that. Think of your portfolio that way. You have a main story you want to tell, right? And that story is very important. You keep that story at the back of your head. When this hiring manager opens up my portfolio, what am I trying to say to them? And that's very important because your entire portfolio should be tied to a singular purpose. So you should have a niche, you should have things that you're trying to say, and we'll do more of that shortly. We'll get into like the niche of things and all of that in a little bit. But specifically for your case study, you want to start, we know that we know what a case study is. It's a single project, and you would usually have, 3 to 4, 5, 6 of these on your portfolio. It's a singular project where like you break down what the issue was, what you did, the resolution, these are the screens, these are what we came up with. So for that, you want to start with a setup. A good setup contextualizes problems for your user. I mean, not for your user, for your reader. It tells them, where's the context, where's this happening? What kind of company was this created for? If it was a project that you created as part of a team within a company. If it wasn't, tell us more about like where it was. Tell us what the problem was. Tell us what some of the users' issues were. What were the things that led to the creation of this product, this project? What necessitated creating a solution like this? And you might be tempted at this point to do this with bullet points. Resist that temptation, because if you were also the one reading it, think about it from that perspective. You would want something that compels you to think, that already engages some aspects of your emotions at this point. So you want to tell a story instead of telling people, oh, the context is that we had issues creating a ordering system for a cafe, and this cafe is situated in a part of the city where there are a lot of users that are being left out of using the app because of their disabilities. So maybe the cafe is very close to a school for people with special needs. And then you start putting that in bullet points. You don't want to do that. You want to start by telling a story. Give us it's a hot afternoon. You've just left the office to go for lunch. You step into the cafe, you go to place your order, and you realize, I can't make this order because XYZ. You're engaging the user and the reader. You're giving them a context that they can imagine in their head. They can find themselves in that situation. They can put themselves in the shoes of, some of these users who experience the problem. You make it big for them that they realize, oh, this is why this issue needed to be addressed. And then you walk them through your design process. So every thought you make, every thought you had during this process, the iterations of your work, the decisions that you made, it's very important to do this in a way that doesn't overwhelm your readers with too much information, because again, you've done a lot of work, there's a lot to show, but you want to give them a highlight reel. You want to give them the most important parts of it. Think about the most impactful aspects of the decisions that you make. Again, what they are looking for here is the way you think. And you can do that in very, very short sentences. So they want to understand what they're looking for in a portfolio is how you think, how do you problem solve, how do you contextualize problems, challenges, how do you connect user issues, how do you connect data to an outcome, how do you connect data to tangible user stories, etc. That's what they want to see. Next, you want to talk about challenges that you face, because every project has its own challenges. There are aspects of it that, you find friction. Maybe you work in a company where there's not a lot of buy-in for design work, and that greatly affects your work, greatly affects the quality of, user testing that you can do, the amount of time that you're giving for things like data gathering. You want to talk about how you went around that. How did you work through that to get to a good solution? You want to talk about issues that you encountered maybe while testing. You want to talk about those. And then finally, how did you resolve it? So this is where you would usually share, oh, these are the finished screens. After all the many iterations, we took out the first iterations. You had mentioned how you took the first iterations for testing, and then you discovered maybe that the reason why people were dropping off a lot during onboarding wasn't actually because the steps were too long. It was because they were actually having issues getting some ID documentation that they needed to complete the process. And now you've addressed that. These are the final screens. What did your final screens help you achieve? As a result of, fine-tuning that process, refining the process of onboarding, and creating a way that supports the users to get their IDs sorted, these were the things that we were able to achieve. And you want to use real numbers. Numbers will always speak louder than words can. It's very unfortunate if you find yourself a very poetic person, you're someone that likes words like me. You're not going to be able to tell people much with your words. But numbers are recognizable anywhere. Most languages, we have different ways of putting different things. Some languages are more poetic than others, but there's a constant, and that's numbers. You put a number anywhere, even if you don't speak the same language, there's alignments, you can communicate something clearly. So you want to use numbers as often as possible. How did this, if you can get, I know sometimes it's difficult, especially considering the context within where a lot of us work. We work with companies where not a lot of data is being gathered about how users are experiencing our products, how users are, getting along with solutions that we've created. But try your best to find as much as you can. If you cannot get like tangible numbers, then just figure out a way to communicate impacts in a way that feels cohesive with the story that you're telling. And then we move from there, and we move. Okay, so before we move, I just want to remind everybody that despite my saying, oh, keep it as simple as possible and all of that, your visuals are still very, very important. So again, use your visuals, get as many images as you can in there to illustrate what you're trying to say. Use quotes, use data, do all the things, but try to make sure that it is cohesive, it is, comprehensive, and we'll get into a little bit more of how to do that shortly. So I'll pass it on to Debbie. Actually,
Right.
no, I think this is me. Okay, so owning your case study story. Yeah, so communicating your constraints and the decisions you made as a result. So this is for situations where, like I just mentioned, the ideal design process isn't an option. You're working in a startup where there are tight deadlines, there are limited resources, everything is moving fast, and people are breaking things. Nobody has time for user research. You're building things and you're shipping it out. You're not checking anything. What happens when you work in a place like this? Or if this is the scenario you find yourself? Maybe you're the only designer in the company and they don't fully understand UX. They just brought you in because they can't have a product that wasn't designed because it will look very bad and nobody would use it. So you're constantly finding yourself in situations where you need to justify design decisions that you make, and you don't have as much buy-in as you would like. In these kind of situations, following a textbook design process is obviously impossible. So you cannot use all the nice fancy double diamonds and the like that we see on design blogs and all of that. You can't use any of those here because your process is already a hot mess. But it doesn't mean you still can't put together a very good, very compelling portfolio for yourself. So how do we do that? How do we showcase our skills in a portfolio when the reality of your work is anything but ideal? The answer is how you communicate. That's what really matters, right? How do you communicate the constraints? Framing it in a way that, of course, it doesn't sound like you're complaining about the fact that you didn't have any of these things, but you frame it in a way that the constraints and the decisions, the reflections that you make for a compelling story, tying it back into that story that we are trying to tell. So start with being transparent about the project's challenges. What kind of issues did you face? Stakeholder buy-in, limited time, technical constraints. Remember, we touched on challenges in the last slide. This is a good place to expand on those. How did that actually affect your process? How did you work around it? How did you get through it? What were some of the methods that you employed to overcome? Because this is work that you're doing on a daily, and you are actively taking steps to overcome those challenges. So what did you do to solve that problem? How did you overcome it? How did you work around it? Share your reflections on what you would do differently if the constraints weren't there. This shows them that you are aware that situations are not always ideal, but you have that can do, and you are able to creatively problem solve and reflect and go back and see, okay, this is what I've learned, this is what happened. Going forward, if I encounter this kind of situation again, I would do XYZ differently. If I had this in place, I would do this other way. You're still telling them this is the reality of what happened, but if things were a bit different, this is how I would have done it. You're showing them the way you think, the way you process things, right? And then the third thing is to stay honest. Honestly, there's a temptation to make up details, fabricate stuff, and all of that. But the truth is, once you tell a lie somewhere, or once you add in embellishments, for lack of a better way to put it, you start seeing inconsistencies, right? It will come up somewhere else, and then your story is not lining up, it's not adding up, because you're trying to plug the gaps and make it look nice with stuff that didn't really happen. It can be a slippery slope, and things can get out of hand very, very quickly. Fabricating details can lead you to inconsistencies and make your story less credible. They think, oh, this person is a liar. So a well-explained constraint, tell them the issue, explain it well, explain your resolution, and that will be far more compelling than a forced perfect process. Because guess what? The truth is that even if you worked within a big organization, or an organization with systems that were set in place, systems that work, you still would not be able to apply these picture perfect processes. I work at a bank. I work at Moniepoint, and the processes there are pretty, you have processes. My team is a team of, I think, about 25, 26 designers. That's a lot of people. So there are some standard things. We have ways of thinking about problems, ways of engaging things, but sometimes these things have to work differently for the sake of what we are trying to achieve. So when you find yourself feeling the urge to embellish things a little, to just sprinkle a little bit of something there to make it sound larger than life, larger than what it is, just try to focus more on the things that did happen and explain those in a way that compels people to understand, okay, this person does know what they're doing. This person is a very good problem solver. This person knows how to think about user constraints, knows how to think about taking data and translating those into requirements and all of that. Yeah. So we'll segue into the next part of this session, which is how to stand out in a crowded market. And Debbie will be walking us through this.
All right, thanks, Ariyike. Just to touch on the last point Ariyike mentioned about staying honest, even though your design process is not like, the textbook standard. I once had a question from someone saying they worked in a team where the design system they built was not the ideal process that they followed or the ideal design system that will be appealing to the users. And they wanted to just change up the colors on the design system on their portfolio. And they hadn't realized that changing the colors would be a mismatch for the whole problem and context that they provided at the start of their case study journey. And so sometimes we might make these small changes thinking it won't affect much, but then you don't know where it will come up. It might come up in your round 3 interview, and then they'll start to notice like those incoherent storylines, or it might come up when they're doing your background check and they reach out to another designer on the team and they're like, actually, no, that's not what we did. So yeah, just staying honest. I think the most important thing, like Ariyike mentioned, is trying to find the most important thing, like Ariyike mentioned, is trying to show that you are aware of what those ideal processes are and that these few things are what you will do differently had you been given the free will or had a bit more liberty to craft that ideal process. But yeah, moving on to standing out in a crowded market. And if you don't mind sharing in the chat, what type of team are you in? Like, what's your team size? Or are you in a startup? Are you in a large organization? Are you looking to join any of those two? And also, how many years of experience do you have in the space? I think that also helps, like the types of examples that we'll be sharing throughout the day. But yeah, you have your case study perfectly outlined, but then how do you stand out in a crowded market? These days, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of job applications being submitted for a single role. And there are things that you have to do to at least be shortlisted and considered and given like a second look when recruiters are screening through your portfolio or your application. And so how do you become intentional about making sure that your portfolio is one of the few that are noticed for whatever job you apply for? The first thing is not every job will be for everybody, and not every industry will be for everybody. Companies are not looking for a jack of all trades. And so it's really important that you identify a niche that you want to be viewed as an expert in or as someone who has enough industry knowledge in. So you need to craft that niche for yourself. And there are several ways to go about this. The niche can be based on your past years of experience in that space, whether it's design related or not. Maybe you worked as a business analyst in the fintech industry for 5 years and you're just starting out in design. That fintech background is important. That business analyst background is important, especially if you're applying to like B2B jobs where you'll be serving other businesses, and that analysis skill will come in play. If you're a new designer with maybe like 1 to 2 years of work experience, and you're wondering how can I craft my niche, that could also just be from areas that you personally enjoy designing or building for. So I know there are some companies that are specific about, we're looking for a mobile UI designer, or we're looking for a desktop designer that can handle like reporting dashboards and like complex systems. If you don't have enough background in an area that you enjoy, you can take on personal projects to build that background in that area. But the ultimate thing here is to pick a niche and make sure that it's very highlighted and very easy to identify within the first 2 to 3 minutes of, actually within the first few seconds of someone scanning through your website. Because honestly, on your homepage, if you have 3 case studies listed there, I should be able to scan and be like, oh, these are all mobile projects. This person knows what they're doing in the mobile space. Or I should be able to scan and see, these are all fintech projects. This person must have a good grasp of the fintech field. again, companies don't want a jack of all trades. They want a designer who will be the best designer for their specific industry and the specific role they're hiring for. So if I'm a fintech founder, I'm looking for someone who has experience in the fintech space or knows about finance or knows about like building apps that transfer money from point A to point B. So pick a niche and focus on that. The second thing is, okay, what of a designer with no experience? I just saw that question come in. I guess to what I was saying on a designer with 1 to 2 years of experience also applies to a designer with 0 years of experience. Take on a side project that you think you will enjoy. You can focus on a few side projects. You can work on as many side projects as you want offline or async, and then select the ones that you naturally enjoyed doing the most to spotlight on your portfolio. You don't have to showcase every single side project you've done in the past 5 years or 5 months, however long you've been doing it. Showcase the ones that you feel are targeted towards the type of jobs you're applying to. And that way you'd also get to stand out and they'd be like, oh, wow, this was a project that was self-generated. I think that also speaks a compelling case for you. The next point is less is more. So you don't want to have a laundry list of portfolios on your website, of case studies rather, on your portfolio website. You want to highlight 3 to 4 or 3 to 6 projects that really tell enough about who you are for them to want to know more. So yes, we know every designer is multifaceted and there's a lot to us, but if I'm a recruiter and I have to scan through hundreds of portfolios and I see one portfolio that has 50 case studies, I'm not about to scroll through all 50 case studies to determine if this person will be a good fit for me. In the first 2 or 3, I would have identified whether I'm moving on or not. So focus on making those 2 to 3 really what elevate you. There are some people who have like inner pages where they now have like an archive of their past projects, if that's what you choose to do, or if you're creating that for a separate type of audience. But don't let that be the most prominent section of your website because then it just gets overwhelming. Half the time, technical recruiters are not the hiring managers, so they don't care too much about the intricate details. I think those come in when you've actually made it past the screening round and are doing like a design interview or a case study walkthrough with the hiring manager. The next thing that's important to note is clear impact. Wherever you can, and I think Ariyike stressed on this really nicely, highlight your impact with numbers because numbers are universal. There are case studies that I have seen where people just explain, I took surveys to gather insights. I then did low fidelity sketches. I then did iterations based on this. They are just narrating the things that they did. Like I checked this box, I checked this box, I checked this box. Explaining the why is more important than explaining the what. So why were those surveys important? Why didn't you do interviews? Was it because you didn't have customers who were willing to come in for 30 minutes? Was it because you were trying to reach a wider audience, which is why you picked surveys over this? How many surveys did you pick? If you say you got feedback about the color, the size, and the navigation flow, which feedback point was most important? This is again how you can use numbers. How will you use numbers? How many people said this specific thing? How did you choose to prioritize or rank the feedback you got based on the number of people that gave that particular feedback? There are creative ways to create data if your company is not one that prioritizes data. Things like the tests you choose to take, you can quantify a lot of like the feedback you get as impact on your work, for instance. So if you did a usability test of a design that you worked on and you're trying to see if it's good enough to be handed over to developers, the result of that usability test can also imply the result of the design. And so you can say, based on the test I did before my design and after my design, these are the ways the numbers changed. But being able to quantify everything also just helps you show that you think very strategically about every design choice that you make. The fourth thing is intentional communication. So a good question to have at the back of your head as you're creating any section of your case study is to ask what context, or even of your website, is to ask what context is this adding for the readers? Is it necessary or is it just a nice to should I leave it out completely or should I emphasize it more? There are some things that you realize if you don't read anything from my case study, this sentence is the most important sentence. Maybe make that sentence bold. So in the same way you can ask questions to determine what to declutter from your case study, it's also important to ask questions on what you can emphasize more on. All right, we also have another question. We are working on an upcoming film, how to incorporate this as a side project. Okay, so that I don't have enough context to answer this question because my first questions right now is, what is your full-time role? What is your portfolio meant to showcase? Is it a design portfolio? Is it a film portfolio? Because there are different ways to navigate showcasing non-design projects in a way that highlight your design skills. So yeah, I guess this will be very dependent on the objective of your portfolio and what it is you're trying to, which industry you're trying to capture with this film project that you'd like to highlight. Yeah.
I actually have thoughts that I want to share just to like add to some of the things that he has mentioned. So something that I have seen with junior designers or had questions with, even at work with my colleagues, is, oh, we didn't get to speak to that many people. Maybe you only spoke to, I don't know, 10 people. 10 people is enough to make a lot of decisions in design. So when your numbers look low in that way, switch to percentages. What percentage of the 10 people said X? What percentage of them said Y? So switch to percentages, because 3 out of 10 is 30%. 6 out of 10 is 60%. If 7 people said something, that's 70%. And that's the number that you need to show. Oh, as a result of conducting user tests, we discovered that 70% of our test group was experiencing XYZ. You have taken out the complexity of how do I explain to people that I only tested this thing with 10 people. Use your percentages, use ratios. Oh, 1 in 3 people. If all you spoke to was 3 people, nobody needs to know that it was 1 in 3 people. So try to mix in some of that if you're struggling with your numbers. Something else to mention is, I know it seems like we're going on and on about how you need to niche down, make it as compact as possible and all of that. But please don't forget to let your personality shine through, because it goes a long way. Recruiters are looking at hundreds of thousands of applications weekly. If your portfolio looks like every other person's portfolio, that's already an issue. If you're somebody that's an illustrator, you can draw. Maybe draw some of your icons yourself, the ones you use, and add in some personalities. It's going to take a little bit of work, but it goes a long way. I have had portfolios in the past where every image I used on my website, I illustrated myself. And oftentimes when I would get into interviews, I would get a lot of questions about it. Oh, this is very unique. How did you get this from somewhere? Did you make this yourself? It's part of the process. They notice these things and it goes a long way. If you're somebody that you enjoy music, and you do a lot of maybe playlisting, or maybe you even DJ somewhere on the weekends, figure out a way to sneak in a section into your portfolio where people can know a little bit more about you, the fact that you DJ. Put it in your introduction. I am a fintech based how would I put this now? My example. I am a mobile first designer with experience in building fintech for African startups who also DJs on the weekend. If you read my current about, I tell people the industries that I've worked in the past, but then I also tell them, oh, I aspire to be a dog mom one day because that's something I really want to do. Already, if the recruiter is somebody that loves dogs, there's a connection there. And that's something that, whether they like it or not, is unconscious. They already have something in common with me. They're thinking, oh, this person loves dogs too. and it might affect the way they actually end up going through the rest of your portfolio. So don't forget to let some of your personality shine through. The last thing I wanted to mention is with finding projects for somebody that doesn't have projects to do. So I think a lot of us tend to want to look for, oh, what things are people doing? What version of it can I do? I can't tell you how many ride sharing, e-commerce apps that I have seen from looking through portfolios. And I'm not saying that's a wrong thing, right? You do what you can with what you have. But as a product designer, a very important skill that you need to have is genuine curiosity. So get curious about the things around you. If you live in a neighborhood where there are certain issues that are prevalent, you've noticed these issues, or you find yourself in online communities where there are certain things that are constantly being spoken about, get curious about some of those things, because that way you would find real people that are having these real problems. You know, you're not imagining some random ride-sharing app that nobody will use because everybody's using Uber or like Bolt already. Nobody's going to use it. So the way you can gather data is very limited. If you get curious about the world around you, get curious about what people around you, speak to people on your level. Like, don't just network upwards, network sideways as well. Ask your friends, oh, what are you working on? What are you finding interesting these days? Learn about what things they're curious about and see what issues there exist there. You will get more people to speak to that way, because now you have real people who are living real lives, who are experiencing this issue. You have like a whole big like resource there. That's data that you can tap into, people you can speak to, people you can actually build for and test with and do all of those things. And you end up with really solid projects that you won't find on 300 other portfolios that solve problems for real people and can turn into something else in the future. Like if you find someone else to collaborate with down the line, maybe you have an engineer friend, you might find yourself on a journey to being a co-founder if that's something that you're interested in. Like, just think outside the box in that way. Don't box yourself in and be thinking, oh, everybody else is building e-commerce apps for plants. Like, don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say another area to get curious about is also just the apps you use on a day-to-day basis. I think just be aware of the steps you're taking to get something done. I know there are sometimes that with our friends, we're like, why do I have to go here and then go here and then go here to be able to send this document? That right there is an idea that you can work on. I've seen a few people actually redesign an app that they use on a day-to-day basis, and that company will actually reach out to them and be like, would like to interview you, because they've seen how much thought you've put into designing their platform in a way that you as a user would be optimized for. And so yeah, that's also another area that you can get curious about. With the apps you use daily, are there any frustrations that you face around completing a specific flow or a journey or something? So yeah, get curious, stay curious, and then yeah, get inspired from everyday living, basically. On the next slide, there's one main phrase we want to stress on, which is done is better than perfect. And I think every designer can relate to this in some capacity or in some way, shape, or form, where we just get overwhelmed with, does my portfolio reflect me enough? Is this case study done enough? My intro line is not good enough, so I'm not yet ready to publish my website. And we can be working on our portfolios forever. And I'm sure if I ask everyone in this room, we have specific things, whether our portfolios are live or not, we have specific things that we'd like to do differently about the way we present ourselves online. Well, that awareness is important, and we do need to find time to create those things and actually complete those projects. Still publish it in its imperfect state. I have gotten, actually, all the jobs that I've gotten so far have been with an incomplete portfolio, quote unquote. I haven't ever felt that my portfolio has been ready enough. And I haven't yet ever, but I won't let that stop me from actually publishing my portfolio, sharing it out there, posting it in the jobs that I'm applying for, because people will still see what it is that I'm trying to communicate in the state that my portfolio is in. And I think that is perfectly fine. Like we keep perfecting it day by day, but like to have something live out there that shows who you are or what you're aspiring to get to is better than not having anything at all. Because ultimately, if I'm going to hire a designer, I'm going to hire someone who has shown me what their working style is or some projects that they've done, as opposed to someone who just says, I'm a great designer. Believe me, I don't have a portfolio, but trust me, I can get the job done. I think the proof is in the pudding. If you can show your work in whichever state, it's better than not being able to show it at all. All right. With that, we would love to get practical before we wrap up this session. On the next slide, Ariyike, if you don't mind. Okay. So we would love to do, I know as you registered for this session, some of you did say yes, you would be willing to share your portfolio. We'd actually love to do a live audit of a portfolio, but we also want to give you a checklist that you can use on your own portfolio to confirm whether or not like it's a standout portfolio, some areas where you can probably spend some time working more on, or some areas to confirm that you've actually ticked off and covered. So we've prepared a portfolio checklist that you can use to confirm whether your design and presentation of your portfolio is answering the right questions, how you've structured your case study, some mistakes that you should avoid. And so we'd encourage you guys over the next few minutes to actually start going through that checklist and figure out areas of improvement on your portfolio or areas that you feel are actually great and you should like press in further on as well. But if there's anyone who is brave enough to share their portfolio with us, we can go through that checklist together in a live portfolio audit. And so that will be up to you if you're able to share your portfolio with us. And as we wait for the portfolio links to come in, I will share the link to where you can get the checklist shortly. But as we wait for the portfolio links to come in, I know we've also received a few more questions in the chat as well as on the Slido link. Yes. On the Slido link, I'll just answer one and then Ariyike, we can tag team answering a few. I'll read out the first question that I'm seeing here. When all your projects are under NDA, how can you apply this setup in a fiction story without real data to back up your findings? I think this question partly answers itself by saying using a fictional story and redacting like the NDA aspect of the. So there's actually two ways to go about this, in my opinion, and two ways that I've done this in the past. First is to make your portfolio project password protected. And what this does is it limits the viewers of this portfolio project to only the people who are reviewing it for the sake of giving you a job or not. To be able to still publicize what is behind that password wall, you need to have gotten approval from whoever that person was, your hiring manager, on sharing this in a password protected website page. I've done this for a couple of projects in the past. There's one in particular where I still was not allowed to share the content, but I hid it behind a password protected wall. And what I said was, I worked with this company, so I took information that they publicly have available. This company has worked with 5 of the 10 leading social media platforms in the world on their trust and safety issues. My work on this was designing a platform that helped X, Y, and Z. References from my direct hiring managers, who happen to be the CEO and CPO, are available upon request. So I'm not putting any information about the case study, but I'm providing enough context to validate that it is a real company, it was a real project, the company has significant reach, and the people who hired me can speak about how good of a job I did if you'd like to speak directly to them. So without saying much about the project, I can still validate or build my credibility that way. In other cases where there's a bit more leniency, you can actually go and spend some time creating fake numbers, creating fake, like even the color palette can change, like a lot of the things can change, but then you're just basically showing your design process, your flow, the things that were important to think about the decisions you made based on those things that were important to think about. And so not really showing the metrics as much, but showing your flow and your journey and highlighting up there. Like it's like we said, it's perfectly okay to discuss what the constraints are, even constraints in terms of how much you can share. And I think recruiters will be very open to that. I don't know if there's any other answer to give to that question.
I think you covered it pretty nicely. It's definitely going to be a lot of extra work, but yeah, it's something you have to be willing to do. Second question here says, I'm creating business and marketing plans for projects during time in college. Can this also count towards portfolio building, or does it apply to jobs itself? So I'm not very sure what kind of jobs you're applying to, because if you're applying to UX designer or product designer roles, then your business and marketing plans don't really have like a direct link to that. Any company hiring a product designer wants to see products that you have designed. They want to see screens, they want to see your UX process and all of that. So I'm not sure, can this person maybe in the chat provide a bit more context, because I don't know what the question is asking me. So I'll just move that to the next question. Many projects I've worked on are for my current company. Should I ask for permission to include them in my portfolio, or is there a standard way to present them? Yes, short answer. While I worked at my previous company, I did that. I asked them, I'm working on my portfolio, trying to put myself on the internet, in a searchable way. Will that tell them that maybe you're looking to leave the company and get hired by someone else? Maybe. And if you work with people who are a bit weird, it might affect, your relationship with them. So it's up to you to figure out like the details of how you go about asking in a way that won't jeopardize the working relationships that you have with people. But if you're unsure, rule of thumb is to always ask. Most other companies, for example, if you work with a larger company, would have absolutely no issues with you putting up work that has already gone live. So if it's not work that has not been, that has not launched, because I think generally nobody wants to see work that has not launched. Go up online. I know someone who got in trouble for doing that. So with their company, where this is work that is still in production, has not been announced, has not launched, and the designer has gone ahead to put it in their portfolio, and they got in trouble with the CEO himself, not just with someone else in the company. So there are definitely a few things to consider, but I think it shouldn't be a problem if it's work that has already been published. There are users using it, it's live. You can definitely just let them know, oh, I'll be putting this up. I don't think you need to if it's work that's in the public already. However, if it's work that's still being done, general rule of thumb, confirm, is this fine? Can I share this? If not, then you would have to treat it basically like NDA work and apply all of the things that Debbie just shared to doing that. Yeah.
All right. I know we also have some questions in the chat, so I want us to quickly go over them.
We're supposed to go on break now, so maybe we can collect some of these questions and then save them for the Q&A sessions later, so that people get to stretch their legs, blink their eyes, grab a glass of water if you need to, a cup of coffee, so that we can continue with session 2 at
Yes.
12:10.
Yes, let's do that. But yeah, for everyone who has posted questions in the chat, thank you for those questions. We'll definitely get to them towards the end of the session. But yeah, those are honestly great questions, and I think there's no those are questions that we've also had ourselves. But yeah, if you want to share your portfolio for a live portfolio audit, I know we haven't gotten to that yet. Please send the link, whether it's directly to our DMs on the chat or to everyone as well. I think we can all learn together as well. But if you'd like to go through the checklist in private, feel free to download the checklist on your own and also just go through it for your own personal website. Yeah. So we can start, Ariyike, the 10-minute break.
All right. I think we've used up a bulk of time for the break, so I'm just going to set up for us a short break time. I hope everyone can see the timer, and when that goes off, we know it's time to come back.
Yes, I can see the timer. Yes.
Your water, anything else, but yeah, get ready for session 2.
Okay, so to kick us off with session 2, we will be talking about standing out on the job market. So now we are going post-portfolio. How do you stand out on the job market? And don't forget that you can send in your questions through the question link that we have, and we'll tackle them at the end. So to start, we talk about positioning yourself for jobs. So a very important part of landing yourself a good job is positioning yourself for the kind of job that you want, so that the people that are looking to hire you can see you, can find you. And to do that, we have 3 things that we think are really key. The first is branding and portfolio alignment. I touched on this briefly earlier, but it is important for your portfolio, your resume, your LinkedIn profile, every place where you appear on the internet professionally. It is very important for the story to be cohesive. Be telling a single story across. Your resume, that's the second piece. Get it right and make sure that you take the time that is needed to build the right kind of portfolio. Use clear bullet points. Don't just make it a list of your tasks that you brain dump. Show the impact that you have been able to achieve from the jobs that you have done. What have you learned from the roles that you've been in? And then tailor that to each role that you're applying to. And then the third thing is LinkedIn optimization. In recent years, we've seen a lot of, workshops and the like on LinkedIn optimization. And I think most people are starting to catch on. But there's still a gap for many people in how they present themselves on LinkedIn. In 2025, there are still people that don't have profile pictures on LinkedIn. I think that's insane. Because at this point, that's like basic of the basics. But like every section of your profile should be cohesive, point people to what you need to. You need to engineer the you that you want people to see, right? At least to get you through the door. We're not saying tell lies, we're not saying tell tall tales, we're not saying manufacture things, but like, craft a story that is cohesive, that is true, and just make sure that you're putting your best self out there. So starting with branding and portfolio alignments, like I said, your resume, your LinkedIn, your portfolio, every place you appear on the internet professionally should align. You should be telling a single story, and that story should be cohesive. The niche strengths that you identified in the last step during your portfolio phase need to be applied here. So if you have told us in your portfolio that I specialize in accessibility-focused design, or I'm great at building complex dashboards, we should be seeing that here as well in your resume. It should be very clear from the headlines that you're using, whatever it is that you're adding, your tools, everything should be coming together to tell a very clear story, right? Your portfolio story needs to carry through. Just repeating that again. Keep your tone consistent. whether you're trying to be formal, if that's your thing, or you're someone who is a bit friendlier or playful in the way you want to speak, own your style, but keep it consistent, right? The way you sound on your portfolio should be the way you sound everywhere else. Yeah, so these are just some very useful tips, like using the same title. So don't call yourself a UX designer in your portfolio, but then you're a product designer and you're a product designer in your resume. Pick a title and stick to it. And we know they can be used interchangeably, but like it's these little things. Most of the people that stand out is because they have a way of paying attention to the little details, and it goes a long way at the end of the day. Okay. So next we have the resume, getting it right. Like I mentioned earlier, you want to use clear bullet point achievements. Don't just list tasks, share your impact. So don't say, oh, I designed UI screens on your resume. Instead, say something like, I redesigned the checkout flow, increasing conversions by 15%. You have told us what you did. You have given us a tangible figure that we can measure by. If you are not sure of the exact figure, you can use about or around, over. If you're not sure of using, specific figures, try to get as close as an estimate as possible, but like let your resume points be impact focused, right? Tell us, oh, I designed and tested UI screens, improving the usability across all products or all apps by 20%. These are a more useful way of saying, oh, every day I clocked into work and I designed screens. Which product designer doesn't design screens at work? What did you in particular do? We want to know what you achieved, not just what you did. Also remember that your resume needs to be tailored for every role that you apply to. And I know this sounds like a lot of work, but it goes a long way. Before you send in your resume, you want to open it up, make a copy. So you have a standard template that you use. You have a resume and it includes all your key experience, your skills, your achievements, and all of that. And then as you have jobs you want to apply for, you make a copy of that, and then you tailor the resume to match the application that you're trying to send in, right? So that the company can see who they are looking for when they look at your resume. So you want it to have only relevant experience, or if you're coming from a different industry, it should include transferable skills that anyone looking to hire you can see, okay, I see how this would work for what we're trying to do. Your resume is a living thing, and the version each hiring manager receives should be tailored for the role in question. So you shouldn't be sending out blanket resumes to everybody. If you're doing that, that's a big mistake, and this is your sign to refine that process for yourself. Include your tools, include your skills, but tailor them to the job you're applying for. Again, not every company, so most companies will publish the kind of software they want you to use, the kind of tools they want you to use. If you have those tools, highlight them there. If you don't, you want to think of what tools have I used before that are similar to this, and signal that I will be able to adapt and apply to this, and then include those and leave everything else out. You don't want to put in all the things, especially with a job like design where there's a tool for every other thing. It will clutter out your resume really quickly, and you don't want that, considering number 5, which is to keep it short. As a junior designer, your resume should not be more than 1 page, including everything you have to say. If you're on a 2-page resume, you're somebody that has years of experience. I have a 2-page resume, for example, because I've been working for a while. But for the first few years of my career, my resume was a single page. Because again, hiring managers and recruiters don't have time to be looking through these. And for the ATS machines, many of them are optimized to do things a certain way. So just try your best to avoid making it too long. Finally, avoid resumes with things like tables, fancy layouts. I know as a designer, there's that temptation to, this is where you want your personality to show. No. You do that in your portfolio. This, you want to keep all those tables out. You want to keep fancy formatting out. You don't want to add in a picture there. None of those, because many of these companies are scanning your resumes with their machines. And if you have too many funky layout things going on, it will not be able to read the actual text that is on the page. And before you know it, you will get picked out of the list and, you will receive a rejection email. So just try to keep it as simple as possible. Lay it out in a simple, readable way. And yeah, follow all the other tips that I have shared just now. So when you're applying to larger organizations, keeping on the theme of machine scanners, there are a number of scanners that you can use just to test out that your resume will pass the test of the machine scanner. So we have apps like JobScan, Resume Worded, or Teal to check how well your resume matches the job description, and it will help you with tips to adjust as necessary. So a good tip, rule of thumb here, if you don't remember anything else I've said from here, 70% is a good match score to aim for with these resume scanners. So if you can get a score of 70 and above, then you know, okay, I am a good enough candidate for this role and I can, apply. This also will save you a bunch of time and energy, to be honest, and heartbreak, because I don't believe there's anybody that enjoys getting rejected from companies that they are trying to get hired by. Next, we have LinkedIn optimization. Again, this is another area that, we're slowly doing a lot better in, but there's still a lot of work that can be done. The LinkedIn profile has multiple sections, and I feel like many of us focus on like a few sections and then we kind of just leave the rest. They're hanging and floating in the air. There's not really anything of value there, which we shouldn't be doing, because the entirety of your profile is a very important tool for signaling to the kind of people you want to hire. And the first place to start is your headline. You want a super strong headline. Make sure that it ties in your niche. Make sure that it ties in the kind of impact that you're making. So tell us, instead of telling us that you're just a UX designer, full stop, tell us that you're a UX designer, that you're improving e-commerce conversion rates through human-centered design, right? If you're somebody that wants to say, oh, I'm a product designer, tell us I'm a product designer. I am passionate about accessibility and scalability systems. Make sure that you are telling us something from your headline, because it is one of the first few places that people encounter you when they search product designers on LinkedIn. It's one of the first things that show. So you want it to be compelling enough that people are interested in clicking on your profile. And that leads me to my next point, which is banners, profile pictures. These two go hand in hand. You need a nice headshot. For me, for example, my current headshot on LinkedIn has a red background, and I have these earrings that I currently have on in those pictures. The image still looks very professional because I'm wearing a white button down, and my hair is styled in a very minimal way. But looking at that picture alone, you can tell exactly what kind of person you're interacting with when you see it. Oh, this person probably has a very bubbly personality. Maybe this person loves colors a lot. There's a lot that you can do. It doesn't have to be the standard baked in suit and tie picture. Everybody is crossing their arms. It doesn't have to look like that. You can add in. So where you couldn't add in your picture in your resume, you couldn't do any personality stuff in your resume, this is the place to do it. Take a nice headshot, something that shows something of your personality, that lets people know from looking at you that, oh, this is the type of person this person is. You'll be surprised, like the things your pictures are telling people that you're not, actively processing, right? Something else to note here is that selfies are a no-no. Please, if you currently have a selfie as your LinkedIn profile image, this is the day to take it down. Like, ask your sister, ask your brother, ask your mother, ask your father, find a white wall somewhere at least until you're able to take a better picture. Find a white wall, find a plain door, find somewhere, ask them to take a picture of you, smile, and use that instead. Because there's nothing that says, oh, I'm unserious the way that a selfie does. It works on Instagram, but not on LinkedIn. I don't make the rules. Yeah, and then your banner. So again, I'll use myself as an example. My banner on LinkedIn is something that I illustrated a couple of years ago. Now I'm currently working on an update for that because I feel like I have, grown a little beyond what is currently there now. But in the same way that draws attention on your portfolio, it also draws attention on your LinkedIn, right? People see it, people who are genuinely curious about things like this will send you a message. Oh, I find this banner very interesting. Where did you find this? What is this about? Did you make this yourself? These are the kinds of questions that you would get. And if you're not getting any questions, it is a delight to the eyes. They land on your page, they see something that looks interesting, it just livens things up a bit. And if you're somebody that you like to share a bit more information, that's another place where you can share like short bullet points, not too overwhelming, just to add to the general information you're sharing from your page, right? Make an impression. For the other sections on your page, you want to keep it engaging, right? Tell your career story in first person. I design products that make complex workflows simple. I do this, I do that, right? Your section should focus on following things written in first person. Tell us who you are, your background, what you specialize in, what you bring to the table. Think about, oh, this is how I solve problems. And then write those out, not just the tools you use. Oh, Figma, oh, Adobe Illustrator, oh, Canva, oh, this, oh, that. That's not what we're doing here. How do you solve problems? What do you bring to the table? I solve problems, I design, along those lines. Add a personal touch, why you love what you love, like why do you do what you do? Why are you a product designer? Why are you here? Who do you do it for? What do you do it for? And then give people a CTA. How can they connect with you? This is a good place. Link your portfolio, link other places you want them to find. Don't forget to give it a structure that makes it easy to scan. As usual, again, people have very limited time to spend on your profile. So you want to make it look very easy to scan. If not, it will just look like alphabet soup and nobody wants that, right? Next thing is your projects and case studies. Again, there's a section that has like features. If you check people's profiles, there's a featured section. This is a good place to use to highlight your portfolio, right? It's a quick, easy way to get your portfolio link in front of people who might not have time like to go and look for it elsewhere. So if you've also written great articles in the past, this is a good place to link them in, right? So a quick exercise that you can do at some point today, open your LinkedIn and check from your headline and your summary. Let's even start with that as a baseline. Do your headline and summary reflect your best skills? If they don't, today is the day to change it. Change it today. Then make a note to go back to it and edit the other things that have been shared with you. Add in your experience using the format of your resume. So don't say because this is LinkedIn, I'll go rogue. No. The tips we gave you for your resume apply here as well, right? Pick the 2 to 3 most important activities for each job role. So unlike your resume where you can add a few more, limit LinkedIn to like 2 to 3 because they'll probably still also check your resume. So limit it to 2 to 3 important ones, share, and then write them using the resume format we've shared. Highlight your education, of course, licenses if you have any, certificates if you have any. And then a part that most people tend to overlook, get endorsements from previous mentors, colleagues, peers, like whoever it is that you've worked with before, get recommendations from them. There's a recommendations feature on LinkedIn. If you didn't know, it usually shows up, at the bottom after education and everything, but it's there. And you can get people who have worked with you previously to say, things about their experience working with you. It's a very good way to signal to people, okay, this person is a good colleague to the people they've worked with, if people are willing to leave them, recommendations and reviews. So a quick message, sample message that you can send to people that you've worked with in the past. Hey, Tola, I really enjoyed working with you on that project. I would love a short LinkedIn recommendation about my work. Happy to write a draft that you can edit to make it easier. Thank you. Always offer to write them a draft to make life easier for them because people are busy. So send them the draft, have them edit it, and then they can upload it to LinkedIn. LinkedIn makes it very easy for you by enabling you to like send in requests actually from your own profile to theirs. So please utilize this feature to get people to write you recommendations. And now we will move on to smart job search strategies, which Debbie will be taking us through.
All right, thanks, Ariyike. So yes, we've done our portfolio. We've optimized how we show up online from resume to LinkedIn, to everything, but how do we actually search for the job? So that's what we'll be talking about now. The first thing is one thing that not many people like, which is networking. In as much as we might not like it, the introverts in the room like myself are not particular fans of this. I still cannot stress how important networking is. It's one of those pains that we just have to go through. But there are creative ways to go about networking. And it's not just this is the only way to do networking. You can leverage, so the simple ones are, just following design leaders, following recruiters, following people in the space. And that's important because it keeps you aware of what's going on there. Is there a new design principle that's been spoken about so much that might come up in an interview that you weren't aware of? Or is there a job posting that one of these people have posted that you might be a good fit for and actually apply? You won't know if you don't have access to those rooms. So you don't know what you don't know. So networking is important to get access to that information. So follow those design leaders. You need to identify them, follow the recruiters, engage with their posts. The more posts you engage with, more content of that nature will be presented to you by the LinkedIn algorithm, for instance. So it's good to engage with posts that you find relevant or helpful for you. If you don't want to comment, you can like it. You can put a reaction on the post. You can also contact hiring managers directly if you see a role that that you will be a good fit for. You can literally pitch yourself and be like, hey, but be strategic about it. I would say apply for the role first, in some cases, and then contact them to be like, hey, I recently applied for this role. These are some of my strong skills. I'd be glad if you consider me for this position. Happy to answer any questions that you might have about me. But another interesting way to network would be through second connections on LinkedIn. I feel like that is often overlooked. And how second connections work is if there is a role that you've seen in a company and you see one of those LinkedIn messages that says maybe 3 alumni from your past school work in this company, or 2 people you know have worked here. Those are people or resources you can leverage to refer you to that role directly. You can also see maybe a company that you're interested in working in, you don't know anyone there. So what I described is a first connection. But in cases where you don't know anyone there, you might go on LinkedIn and you might see a second connection. What a second connection means is that somebody you follow directly follows that person. And so if you don't want to reach out to that person directly, you can ask the person that you follow to introduce you to that person. That's a second layer. It's a very less stressful way to network because you're reaching out to someone you hopefully already know, already have a rapport with. If there's a job I want, and I see Ariyike knows the person who's the hiring manager in that company or knows someone who works there, I can tell her, hey, please introduce me to this person that I see you know, because I'm interested in applying for this job. I can be very casual with how I approach her because I already have that rapport with her. So leverage your second connections on LinkedIn. And the third thing I'd say on networking is speak with people around you. Like tell them about what you do, tell them about what's interesting to you, tell them you enjoy design. A lot of the opportunities I got access to was because someone in my network knew that I'm a designer and that, oh, this is something Debbie would like. Let me share it with her. and somehow that turns into a full-time job. It's funny how that happens, but it's true because when people are hiring, if I have 100 to 500 applications to look through, and 20 of those applications came from people that I know and I trust, I will prioritize reviewing those 20 before I review the remaining 480 or the remaining 80, because I'm like, if Ariyike refers a designer to me, she knows that that person is a good designer, so I'll be open to considering them first. I don't have time to look at 500 applications when I need to fill this role in the next 2 weeks, for example. So really just speak about what you do to your immediate circle. It doesn't always have to be the hiring manager. It just has to be people around you. They need to know what you're doing so that they know what type of opportunities to send your way. You never know. There are probably people in this room that have access to some of the things you're looking for, but they'll never know that you're looking for it if you don't mention it. So yeah, networking is key. Where to look for your jobs? I'd say if you're only looking on LinkedIn, you're not yet searching for a job. You need to diversify where you look for your jobs from. There's a platform called builtin.com that I personally love, but there's LinkedIn, there are company career pages, there are design communities, there are referrals. One thing I'd say about job boards like LinkedIn, Builtin, Indeed, and all these other ones is it's important that you filter roles that were just posted in the last 48 hours. And I say 48 hours because that job is still fresh. There are not as many people that have applied to it. And if you submit an application that early, your resume or your application will be top on the list when the recruiter goes to scan through applicants. Versus if you're submitting an application for a job that was posted 5 days ago or 7 days ago, with the rate at which applications are being submitted, yours will be buried way down, and it will be very hard to spot you unless someone has referred you already, which goes back to the first point on networking and getting those referrals. So you really want to limit. I think it's possible to get jobs for sure. I've gotten some where you had zero referrals and you knew no one in the company, but you have to be smart about it and filter for past 24 hours. If you don't find any, actually past 12 hours, if you don't find any results, expand that range to 24 hours and then expand that range to 48 hours. But that really positions you to apply for roles that will put your resume on the top. And then how do you apply effectively? So first, I think Ariyike has spoken on this, customize your resume, customize your portfolio for each job. Recruiters are not looking for umbrella resumes anymore. The one thing that I like to do is to use these ATS tools that Ariyike also mentioned and put the job description right next to my resume. I'll find the keywords in those job descriptions and try to make sure that my resume has those keywords inside them. It takes more time, but it yields more results. I would rather apply to 20 jobs that I took my time to customize than just submit the exact same resume to 100 different jobs. And so really taking that time to match your resume to the job description that you're seeing is really key in helping you stand out, especially if you're applying to larger organizations that use these ATS tools and like they're trying to filter candidates and things like that. Making sure that you align closely with them will be the point of doing what I just described. Because if they see, we mentioned collaboration. She has mentioned collaboration in her resume. We want someone who has done design systems. She has spoken about a design system she has built. They see a lot of alignment and similarity, and they're open to exploring you further. LinkedIn easy apply, but always message a hiring manager separately. So yeah, you can use LinkedIn apply, but add that personal touch by sending it to the hiring manager as well, because you don't want your resume or your application to feel generic. Another point that I'd mention that you can also use for LinkedIn is to actually search on LinkedIn. Sometimes you can literally just go on your LinkedIn search bar and search #hiring. I think we can do that activity after I go through this page so that you actually see how you can get this done. And you also see what I mentioned about second connections and things like that. The last step when you're applying for roles is to keep a job application tracker to stay organized. This is something that I've done over and over again, and I have found very, very helpful. But you can have a job application tracker that shows you the job role, the date you applied, the status, the position, any detail about the company, you can keep that there. Maybe you can even link the custom resume you made for that job in that same sheet. And so you keep everything organized. You're able to track and see, oh, I applied for this role 2 days ago and they got back to me. Maybe you end up getting multiple offers. You can go back to that job tracker and be like, well, these guys have given me an offer. It took them 3 weeks to get back to me the first time. So I'm probably not first on their list versus these guys who have given me an offer and I just started the process 2 weeks ago. Like just reviewing your application tracker can tell you a lot about the companies you're applying to and what you should do should you get an offer from them. But yeah, definitely stay organized, keep things aligned, and it makes your process a bit more seamless and stress-free. I want to quickly share a LinkedIn page and show you how you can also, again, optimize LinkedIn in your search. So give me 1 second. All right, so I am searching for product design, hiring. Let's do that because I want a job in product design, in case that wasn't clear. There are several things that come up here, but specifically what you can do is to go to posts. And what this does, it filters the results based on people who have posted that they are hiring for product designers. So I can see this person posted 4 days ago that they're hiring a UI or UX designer. I can view the job and I can apply. I can also sort this by top match or latest. So I only want to see the ones that were recently posted. See, this guy just posted right now that they're hiring, and I can read the details and see if I'm a good fit or not. So beyond just the LinkedIn job board, you can also leverage postings to see who's hiring, if you qualify for that role. Are you a first, second, or third connection to that person so that you can also contact them or get a referral? In terms of connections, let's say I want to connect with a fellow product designer. Let me go to all. And then let me go to people. Okay, so I can see there are many different product designers here. Second means I am not directly connected to this person. But let's say I want to connect with Heart. I can come here and see there's one person in my network that's connected to this person. And so I can reach out to this person in my network and be like, hey, I'd love an intro to Heart. And they can give me an intro directly. But if I want to be the one to make my own personal intro, there are also ways I can navigate that. I'll just say 2 things about that. I think there are creative ways. If there's someone who you're not connected to, you don't have any mutual friend or anything, there are still ways you can engage with that person. You can reference something that they've done in the past. So you can say, hi, person. I love the case study that you shared on this particular topic. I'd love to connect and learn more about your work or your design process or whatever. You can also identify something that's that you both have in common. You can say something like, hey, person, I noticed on your LinkedIn profile that you've also transitioned from being an analyst to being a designer. I'd love to make that transition as well and would love to connect. People love sharing their stories. They love seeing that you're not just sending them a generic connection request, that you're being intentional about wanting to connect with them. There's something about them that stands out to you, and being able to call out what that thing is will really make your networking process seamless. But at the end of the day, we win some, we lose some. I think applying these strategies will not guarantee you 10 out of 10 responses for every 10 messages you send. So you should also be prepared for that. And I don't think that should deter you. you might reach out to 10 people, but only get one response. That one response could lead to so many doors of opportunity for you. And so I think it is still worth that effort, but that's also just a huge disclaimer to make. All right. We've applied for the job and we've now been called for an interview. How do we ace design interviews, take-home assignments, behavioral questions? There are several strategies we can do for this, and we'll just walk through them. The first is to do your homework. Never go unprepared to any interview. Never go unprepared for any take-home assignment, any interview, even if they say it's just a final round interview with the, COO or whatever. Always stay prepared. One practice that I've done is I have an interview script that I keep for myself. That script has a lot of the common questions that I get asked and my baseline talking points for each of those questions. So whenever I have an interview coming up, I just go through that script and like refresh myself with like the answers that I want to give to those questions. If some things have changed, maybe I've gained more years of experience or my perspective has changed about a specific topic, I can update my script. But I've found that having that script really helps me answer the questions more naturally because I've said those answers repeatedly in the same way or in the same format or referencing the same examples. Having that script can also help you repurpose some of your answers. So there are sometimes you can never plan for all the questions that you'll be asked in an interview. But let's say I have a specific story about how I tackled a challenge. I can use it to talk about a challenge. If a challenge was asked, I can use that same story to talk about managing stakeholder conflict if that challenge involved a stakeholder. So you can end up repurposing some of the stories that you have in these interview scripts to fit with different types of questions that you can get asked. The second thing I'd say is read the room. Pick up on non-technical cues that may have been signaled during your interview. So an example is one of the interviews I had, the first thing the recruiter or hiring manager commented on was a side mentorship project that I had done. And I realized with learning and transferring learning to others was really important for that role that I was looking for. And so in some of my responses, I tied it back to that comment that they had made at the start of the interview. It was just a tell me about yourself question. And she said, oh, I noticed you also mentor XYZ. And I was like, yes. And so when a different question came up, I tied it back to that. But just picking up on cues for what it is they're looking for and being able to make sure that you bring that out in other answers of your interviews will be important. A third thing is to always, always ask questions. That question they ask at the end, do you have any questions for me? Ariyike and I have also had to hire people, and it's usually just people who just say no. We look at them like, okay, cool. We want someone who has genuine interest and is showing curiosity when they are looking for the job. So using this section of your interview to show how you think and to show the things you're curious about is important. Before you start asking about how much salary will I get, when is the start date, all of those things, make sure that you've asked questions that show how you think, and how you would like to show up. Some questions that I like to ask are, I've worked in different companies and I've noticed that different companies assign product manager and design roles very differently. So how do you expect someone in this position to behave? Like what things do you want the product designer to do? Because product design roles and product manager roles are usually blurred. So getting that clarity is important. Another question I like to ask is, what impact would you like the person in this position to make within their first 3 months of being there? That allows you to know what it is they're looking for. It allows you to know, am I qualified to do this in the next 3 months if I do get this job? But it also allows them to know that you mean business. You're coming in because you want to help them hit those goals that they're hiring you for. So just staying curious. You can also ask if you feel like you've blundered at some point in the interview. A good question to ask at this point is, is there any aspect of my answer during this interview that you'd like me to clarify or explain further, or that you found a bit confusing? But it gives them a way to call out any red flags they might have noticed during the interview and allows you to like sort of like respond to that, or like to smooth that friction in the interview process. It also leaves a good taste in their mouth. Another point is prepping for your portfolio talk. So some interviews will have a case study walkthrough. So I'd say similar to doing your homework on an interview script, you should also create a script for walking through your case study. There are some people who will just open up their portfolio website to walk through a case study. I strongly advise against that. Create a slide deck, create a presentation, and walk through your case study that way. It shows that you're more prepared. It shows that you're more structured. The portfolio online was a good way for them to scan through it, but it's not a good way to present a portfolio. So create that presentation, practice how you answer so that you highlight only the points that are important. If you worked on that case study for 6 months or 12 months or even 3 months, there are so many things you could talk about, but the interview is like 30 minutes long. So you want to practice to know which points you want to stress on, which points are important to mention in the interview, and to know that you've left them enough time to ask you follow-up questions at the end. Nail the take home. I think people struggle with this sometimes because, one, we're trying to show them how much we can do and we fail to actually answer the question that's given. I'd say read the question. There are some times where a question says submit sketches, and then some people go and submit high fidelity designs. That's a fail. So make sure that you're answering the right question, restate the problem, your understanding of the problem, and show how you solved it. The take home is just meant to show how you think as a designer. They're not expecting a perfect solution because they've only given you context in a brief on something that they've probably been working on for years and years. So they're not expecting you to get it right. They just want to know how you think and how you're able to follow instructions. If they say sketch, submit a sketch. If they say high fidelity, submit a high fidelity. If they say bullet points, submit bullet points. Like, don't overdo, basically. Which leads to the last point: keep it clear and simple. Avoid overcomplication. Don't make it vague. Avoid saying too much and avoid saying too little. So define the scope and set a very clear boundary, whether it's on the take-home assignment or whether it's on like the way you choose to answer questions. Try to keep it simple. I think sometimes less is more, but being able to know what less is important to say is also, I guess, where the trick is. Yeah, I would love to know if there are any questions on this. I think the next thing that we have for you, Ariyike, if you could go to the next slide, is another guide, which you may have seen already, but this is an interview guide that we've prepared. Like I said, we have interview scripts where we have common answers or how we would typically answer specific types of questions. And you can use this guide as a way to create your own version of an interview script. Identify what some common questions are, create your own version of what your answers could look like, and then practice them so that when you're now in the interview, you get a bit more natural with how you practice them. Yeah, I'll let Ariyike explain a bit of the exercise for anyone who's interested. I don't think we received any portfolio links for a live audit, so I think people are shy.
Yeah, I think we are, which is unfortunate because it would have been really nice to get a little bit into that. So for this one, we want to see if anyone would be interested in doing a quick fire, tell me about yourself with us, based on what they've learned already so far. If we have any volunteers who would like to tell us about themselves, we can pick maybe 2 people. Just unmute yourself and then we can give feedback based on that. If we have any takers, just indicate in the chat. I'm not seeing any people volunteering.
Some people are dropping their portfolio link in the chat.
Oh, okay. It would have been nice to do that at the last step. We'll see, maybe we might have time to do it at the end of this process.
Okay, someone raised her hand. Ola Shile. Yes, you can go.
All right, thank you very much, Olashile. Would you like to unmute yourself and tell us about yourself?
Hello, everybody. Hi. It's been a wonderful session. Thank you to the amazing ladies. Oh my God, I love your smile. Thank you so much. I've not really wasted my time because there's been a whole lot of amazing insight from you ladies, and it's been nice, right? My name is Olashile Amina, and let's say I cannot say I'm a beginner because I cannot measure my years of experience with my work because I have it with school to get. So I'm into UI UX and community management, 300 level computer science students, and that's all basically.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for being brave and telling us about yourself. So, for example, what did you say you study? Could you?
I'm a computer science student, 300 level.
Oh, you're
You
just
want me
like,
to say something? Can I say something?
yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I just realized that I didn't mention the fact that not like I'm job hunting. I'm currently looking for like IT placement for my CUS program. So I don't know if you guys have anything to say about that. It's been I don't know, it's been a ride, honestly. They said learn a skill. I've been learning a skill since 100 level, but I'm not as good as somebody that dedicated a whole 1 year to learning just the skill, right? Because sometimes I pause for exams, sometimes I have to leave boot camps because of academics to just balance it. There's no actual balance. Honestly, this school balance or work-life balance, there is no actual balance. So that's what I wanted to say. Like, if you guys have something to say about the CUS program, probably somebody has undergone it before, or there was any way you did yours. Please just share. Thank you.
All right. So before we move to answering the second question, just to talk about the first, which was telling us about yourself. So it sounds like, again, if not maybe a new designer, you're still pretty early in your journey. So if I were Olashile, for example, right? And a hiring manager asked me, oh, so tell me about yourself. I would start by saying, my name is Olashile Amina. I am a third-year computer science student with an interest in, so if maybe so far the projects I've worked on are related to ride sharing, building stuff for people to transport themselves around cities, I could say with a specific interest in building for urban cities, because I am passionate about seeing people live better lives and transport themselves from place to place easily. Already, you've started by telling this person, okay, this is what I enjoy doing, and this is why I enjoy doing it. And then you can start to tell us, previously, I have worked on 2 apps that have helped this number of people or that number of people achieve optimized transportation for rush hour periods in Lagos and Abuja, or with Lagos and Abuja as test cases, right? Maybe because you spoke to people particularly in this city. Through these projects, I learned how to effectively apply remote testing methodologies, maybe because you spoke to a lot of people over Google Meet, over WhatsApp, since you couldn't go and visit them in person. And it taught me a lot about speaking to people, remote, gathering data while I am not on the ground. So I have had an opportunity to get familiar with collecting data from a distance, right? This is a very short tell me about yourself, but you've succeeded in telling this person that, oh, I have technical background. If you add me to a team, I'll work really well with my engineers because I have a CS degree and I understand what they are doing. You've told this person that you're very interested in building transport apps and you're passionate about it because of a very tangible reason. You've also told the person you've worked on projects that they can actually ask you about and you can talk about, and you have learned XYZ from working on those projects. You've already given this person so many talking points. You've given them such context on what you do and why you do it. That's a very strong tell me about yourself, and you haven't even done any full-time jobs yet. So that's one example. I can see another hand raised. I'm assuming this person would like to tell us about themselves as well.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah,
Go.
I just want to try to do it. You said 5 minutes or less.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like I'm currently trying to interview, but I've not done this in a minute. So I just want to see how I would do on that. Okay, yeah, so my name is Didi. I'm a product designer with about 5 years experience in design. But if I was to total that, I would say about 8 years experience working in the technology industry, as I worked across content marketing before I eventually switched to design. My design career started in okay, my career started in 2017 when from having a personal blog where I would usually design my blog with WordPress. Then eventually I picked up a career in content, then in marketing before I transitioned to design. Very early in 2020. In this period, I've worked across finance, I've worked across real estate, I've built apps for recruiting, media, and also I've worked in a bank, yeah, because at some point I worked in United Bank of Africa, UBA in Nigeria. At some point I worked in a prop tech startup. I worked in Split in Nigeria. I also have a master's degree in user experience design, which I got from London College of Communications. And currently I work for an investment bank for the past 3 years of my career. And yeah, I don't know if there's any other thing I should have added to that, but that was just like on the spot, top of mind.
Debbie, would you like to?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Well, thank you for sharing. I think first comments, I think that was a really nicely crafted to really highlight all the different things that you've done so far. Like I feel like I have a good grasp of your background and your experience. So that's a great job there. Also your years of experience in the space. Some areas that I'd say will be helpful to work on is condensing it a bit. So you've spoken about great things, but you don't want to be too lengthy
Okay.
in your response. Some of the things you mentioned, especially towards the end, if I was the hiring manager or the recruiter, I would have already read them on your resume, like the
Okay.
different places that you've worked in the past, the number of
Okay.
years you've worked there, where you're currently working. I feel those details are already available on a resume, so don't spend time talking about them in it. Tell me about yourself. I think
Okay.
what you can focus on would be, hi, my name is Didi. I have 8 years of experience in the technology space, but 5 focused in design. My interest in design grew when I started blogging, which later evolved into content and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've worked across fintech, I've worked across banking and X, Y, and Z, which
Mm-hmm.
is what got me excited for this specific role. I'd say if there's anything you want to stress on, you can stress on the industry that relates to the specific role you're applying for. So if it's a banking design role, you can stress on that role in your intro. If it's a fintech company, you can stress on the fintech experience you have. You don't have to talk about everything you've done. You can keep it focused on the niche that you're applying for that we spoke about. But yeah, I think great work. I think just try to condense it and not repeat things that are existing on your resume.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. One question would be, if I was applying to a company like Google or like Meta, and I've not really worked in maybe like social space before, how do I tie my banking experience, which is like my most recent experience, to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say focus on the transferable portions of your past experience. So Google is not a bank, but there are several things you've learned in that bank. So you could say, in my past 2 years working at this bank, I've learned a lot about the importance of numbers, the accuracy of numbers, using numbers to make decisions, and using numbers in my design process. And I'm excited to bring that onto a company like Google that also prioritizes data-backed decisions for users. Something like that. Sorry, I came up with that right now as well. But yeah, try to find something that can be transferable from your past experience to the company that you're targeting, because there's always something. There's different ways you can spin your past experiences.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for participating. That was very fun. We will now move to the next step, which is, it should be questions, but we're supposed to be on break now. So we want to give you guys time to take another short break, or I don't know if you would like to just continue and go straight ahead so we can continue into the next session, and then maybe we'll take like bulk breaks, like a bulk break at the end. How's everyone feeling about continuing? Can we see reactions in the comments to gauge? Okay, I'm seeing continue. Can I get more answers? Can I get, if there's anyone who feels strongly about taking a break, would you please let us know in the comments? All right, so it seems you guys want us to continue. So we will jump straight into session 3. And session 3 is my favorite because it kind of ties everything together. It's a very positive session, because here we are assuming that you have gotten your job, you were successful, everything that you tried worked out, you now have your new role. So how do you excel now that you have arrived? And Debbie will be kicking us off with what to do on your first 90 days.
All right. So yeah, we're speaking it into existence. We've all landed those dream jobs. Exciting times ahead. I will say those 3 months are really defining moments to build as much credibility in your new role, to build trust with stakeholders in the company. So it's really important that you're very intentional about maximizing what you do, how you do it in those first 90 days. The 3 key themes for these 90 days is, in your first 30 days, your focus should be to absorb and discover all there is to learn in that company, in that role, in that team. Your next 31 to 60 days should be to start contributing and building your credibility. And we'll get into what exactly that looks like, how you should go about doing that. And then finally, in your last 61 to 90 days, I think at that point, people will already start to have a perception of who you are as a designer, what you contribute to the team. And so these next 30 days are to actually deliver impact and start to take ownership and start to do things of like high value. So yeah, let's get into it. What to do from day 1 to day 30. On the next slide, Ariyike. So day 1 to day 30 is all about learning. I'd say don't be too scared about what you don't know. I'd say lean into that. And how I like to approach that in any new role is, first, you start by reviewing what exists. There might be information overload in those your first few days, and that's perfectly okay. But consume all the information there is to consume. Review past design work. How have people approached those designs? Even beyond the design work, you might need to review information about the company as a whole, because that gives you a better picture to why things were designed the way they were designed. Look into those Figma files. How are the files organized? What is the color palette? How do they apply it to the designs that they create? Understand the company culture, understand the team dynamics, who are the decision makers, how are decisions made, what flow do decisions go to? Does it have to be signed off by 5 different people for something to be done? Is it a less hierarchical structure where everyone has ownership and you are the one to make those decisions and just go with the flow? So yeah, just consume as much knowledge as there is in that space, because that's very, very important. Prioritize listening over doing. And why this is important is you don't want to come in as someone who is a know-it-all, and then just come in day one and try to say, oh no, y'all are doing this wrong. This is my suggestion. Let's do this. This is what I've done, XYZ. While your suggestions are useful, they should come in later. I think you need to first understand the intention behind what they've done in the past. You believe you're joining a team of smart people, so there's probably some smart reasons why they've made certain decisions that you might not be aware of. So just focus on soaking in all the information there is to soak. My personal favorite is number 3, though, setting up your personal documentation system. This includes a task template. So how do you want to be tracking tasks that you do on a daily basis? Set that up. If your team uses Notion, create your personal Notion private file that allows you to track your daily tasks. And that is going to be so, so important with like tracking your progress of work, tracking the projects that you contributed to, the people you collaborated with. And so maybe 6 months down the line, they can ask you, what have you done? You have your daily task tracker there. Have a work diary that you can also set up in this first 30 days. For me, my work diary will have that daily task tracker. It will have a check-in template, which is basically my note document for each one-on-one conversations I have. So I start building a one-on-one document for each meeting I have. And that way, if I've been meeting with Ariyike for the past 3 months and she brings up something that she mentioned to me in week 1, I can go back to my notes and scroll up to week 1 and know exactly what we spoke about, what those action items were and everything. Documentation is everything because it provides proof of what was said and not said. It provides proof of what the actions were. And it actually helps you remember things. Remember things that you can then put into your resume or put into your portfolio or use to negotiate salary down the line. Like there's a lot that documentation can help with. So write down. It's better to write too much than not to write enough. The 4th thing is, like I said, take notes on everything. I'd say everything beyond just the one-on-one check-in notes that you take. Some other notes that are important to take are notes on your first impressions of the team, your first impressions of the product. As you're going through the product in your first 30 days, if there's any point in the flow that seem confusing or that seem hard to understand or that make you pause and ask a question, please take note of that, because what's going to happen down the line is after the team explains why they did it the way they did it, you now understand the rationale, and that first impression perspective is lost. So you really want to capture that first impression perspective and document it, because it will help you with your designs later on. It will help you propose fresh perspectives that, oh, some users might be thinking of this like this because I came here and I was wondering why we did XYZ. Now I know it's because of a technical constraint, but for users that don't have that knowledge, this is something we should probably create a creative solution around. So really leverage that your first impression perspective, because every other person in the company will not have that. And that will be your superpower to carry you through the first 90 days. Document it, observe it, take note of it, and soak it all in. We'll move on to days 31 to day 60. Here it's all about building credibility, and we build credibility in many different ways. I will say the first thing is to take on the very small projects. So you want to focus on the low-hanging fruit here. You don't want to focus on projects that might take you 6 months to implement, and people won't get to see how much value you bring to the table until 6 months after you've been hired. I know you will have your daily tasks or your immediate expectations that your manager will expect from you, but you can choose to take on low risk, high impact tasks that show the value that you bring to the table. So if it's a quick UI fix or something you notice about the button placement on a specific screen that maybe users are stuck, maybe the button is below the fold instead of being above the fold, or just like minor fixes that you can propose so that they can start seeing some quick wins from you. And they're like, yeah, we hired the right person. She's always asking the right questions, or like she knows exactly what changes need to be made. I think that will be very important. Also improve your collaboration and communication with a focus on business impact. What this means is you need to start letting your voice be heard in the different spaces that you're in. You need to start asking questions, participating in design critiques, getting feedback from other people about how you're doing, what changes you need to make. I think those are very important. And work closely with cross-functional teams. A lot of people say, oh, engineers are so difficult to work with. I actually find that the trick is to make friends with engineers, and they're willing that way to listen to you or to problem solve with you or to actually push above and beyond for a complex design that you're proposing because you've approached them as a co-creator as opposed to just the other team that has to create my work and they never get my designs right and whatever. If you take that new perspective and make them sort of co-owners, bring them on early in the design stage so that they can collaborate with you and be like, this might not work, so maybe try this other design, but you guys help each other and it becomes like a win-win situation. So you need to actually collaborate with the people around you. Another way you can start to communicate if you're an introvert like me is one trick that I usually say is if you have a meeting that's not one-on-one, usually one-on-ones are easier to do because it's just one other person you're talking to. But if you're in a room filled with, let's say 10 different people, whether it's a virtual room or an in-person room, my suggestion to you would be to be the first person that shows up in that room. And what that does is it helps you to ease your nerves. You're the first person that shows up, you set up everything you need. When the next person shows up, have small talk with that person. Ask them how their day was, whether they've eaten. You guys can have small talk, how you're enjoying your experience here. Even if it's a virtual room, have that one-on-one small talk with that person. The next person comes in, engage that person as well. The next person comes in, engage that person as well. By the time everyone has come, you've already spoken to 2 or 3 people on a one-on-one basis, and you're feeling more comfortable because you've already spoken and all the, shakiness of your voice is gone. And so when the meeting is ongoing, you can actively participate. If you're shy to look at other people, look at the people you spoke to when you first walked into that room, and it will feel like you're building a personal rapport with them, but it will also show that you are engaging and you're letting your voice be heard and you're actually being a user advocate, which is what they hired you to be. The next thing will be to build your influence by identifying and initiating a process improvement opportunity. So that could be anything. The first thing was, work on low-hanging fruit, but you can also think about, are there things about the way things work here that I feel can be done differently? This could be a time to start proposing different ideas and seeing different people's reactions. Do they love your proposal or do they hate your proposal? Again, these early days are days where you're coming in with things that have worked for you in the past and you're trying to learn what has worked in the company. Past the first month, you can already tell this sprint cycle that we do is probably not the most effective cycle. Can we try X? And you're not saying we should implement this right away, but you're just letting your suggestions be heard and seeing how people in the room respond to them. They might love it, they might hate it. So also listen to those non-technical cues like we spoke about. How are they responding when I say certain process improvements? Because it helps refine the types of suggestions or feedback that you give down the line. Lastly, grow your knowledge. I think this is something that will still be an ongoing thing. You just need to keep maintaining your learnings, maintaining your work diary. As you learn things or discover things, document them because it helps increase your knowledge of the industry and the company in specific. And I think this is very useful because it gets to a point where you have so much knowledge about the company and how it works that in itself is enough to get you a salary negotiation or a pay raise down the line because you know your stuff about the technicalities of the company. And you wouldn't have known that if you don't document the things you know so that you know the things that you still need to know or the gaps in your knowledge that you still need to expand on. So days 31 to 60, are about showing your thinking, not just your outputs. Yes, you want to build credibility by working on low-hanging fruit, but you also want to show how you think about things, which is why it's important to speak up in those meetings, which is why it's important to document how people are reacting to things so that you can tell them later on, this is why I proposed what I proposed. You're trying to show them how you think, and so they can start to build trust with you. What to do in the last 30 days, which is day 61 to 90. Ariyike will walk us through that.
Right, guys. So at this point, you've been there, it's been 2 months. At this point, when you start asking certain questions, people are wondering, haven't you been here long enough to know the answer to this? It's an interesting time. You've been there long enough that you're no longer super new, but you're also not someone there that you've not been there for long enough. What's key at this point is to start thinking beyond your tasks and to begin influencing decisions, right? You want to start to stand out a bit more so you don't get too many haven't you been here for long enough type questions. And one way to do that is to take ownership of a key project or lead a design initiative. Now, I know this might sound scary, especially if the role you've been hired for is something that is more at a junior level. You might be wondering, what do I have to add? What do I have to say to influence this kind of thing? How am I able to lead any projects at my level? But a good way or a life hack that you can do is, as a junior designer, you probably work under, somebody else that is either a lead or a manager or some sort of thing. At that level, you want to, converse with them, collaborate with them, and convince them to give you a small share. So if there's a large cake of work to be done, convince this lead designer to give you like a small share that you can take ownership for and deliver on, right? At this level. One practical way of doing this is, let's say perhaps you join the team, you guys are going to have to do user testing for something, for example. Everyone else is working on their stuff. You can contact like your lead designer, your manager, and tell them, oh, would it be okay for me to handle working on the research plan for this? I have done XYZ in the past. I believe I have enough knowledge to attempt this. Of course, you don't want to try your hand at things for the first time on time-sensitive projects. So if you know it's the first time of doing something and like this thing is something that has a deadline that it cannot be missed, if not, somebody's head will be on the chopping block. You don't want to do that. You want to try these kind of things with, just gauge the situation, but like that's one way you can do it. Oh, can I take ownership of building the test plan? Oh, can I take ownership of recruiting people? And like just use that to do it from end to end so people can see this is a can-do person. They are ready to do the work. They are ready to put, their best foot forward and get things done. You make friends, don't forget your work diary, continue like creating systems and doing all of those things that you've been doing before. Just keeping on with all of those things. Don't forget them just because, you've come this far and your first 2 months are over. You want to keep doing those things that we mentioned earlier. You also want to start mentoring or supporting junior designers or interns. These are for people that are either more senior or mid-level at their roles, right? So what you're thinking about is longevity. You want to start interacting with people who are earlier in their career than you are, who you can contribute to their learning and their growth and their development, right? This is something that you can also do. Build visibility by speaking up in team discussions and advocating for users. Again, I think Debbie already mentioned some of this earlier, but the things that you say at this point may not necessarily be groundbreaking things. They may not necessarily be things that It's not like other people in the room have not thought of these things. But you want to think about how your work as a designer within the organization is affecting business goals. You want to think about how the work you're doing is impacting. There's going to be a lot of critical thinking involved here. You want to make suggestions, make contributions that show that you have reached a point where your grasp of what the business is trying to achieve, the mission and vision, you understand how that aligns to your day-to-day work, and you are very committed to, pushing that bigger goal forward, because at the end of the day, that's what they hired you for. That's why you're getting paid money, right? Offer insights as much as possible. Again, I want to harp on this over and over. Please think before you speak, because I feel like people hear a lot of, oh, just say something, contribute in meetings. So you get people that they will ask questions that they haven't really taken their time to think about, or they say things that end up dragging. I don't know how to do this in a way that doesn't, or say this in a way that doesn't discourage people from asking questions or raising their voices in conversations. But the summary of this point basically is to thoughtfully contribute, right? Make sure that you can draw a line from what you're saying to how it ties in with your role, to business goals, the larger business goals, the goal of the conversation that is being had, etc. Right? Make sure it is valuable. What is coming out of your mouth is valuable. And then ask for feedback on your progress from your manager and for your teammates. At this point, you've been here for 3 months. You've seen so much, you've learned so much, you've done so much. Hopefully at this point, you've had your hands in a bunch of different things. People have worked with you for long enough to be able to give you feedback on certain things. You want to be proactive about seeking that out. In most organizations, there's usually a set system for performance reviews and the like. So this shouldn't be too much of an issue. But you want to go beyond getting feedback from your manager, because your manager is one perspective of your work life, right? They interact with you through specific lens. The relationship is a specific type of relationship. The kind of working relationship you have with people that are your teammates, that are on the same level as you, or are in other teams that you engage in cross-functional work with, is different. And you want to make sure that you're getting a holistic feedback from as many people as you can, so that you're not missing anything, you're covering all your bases at any given point in time. Please don't forget that you keep a running list of those contributions that you've been making and your impact metrics that Debbie has mentioned at the beginning, and just make sure that this is incorporated into your work life, and you do it often enough that when it is time to have conversations about promotions and increasing your benefits and the like, you actually have tangible evidence, because you cannot make proposals for people to give you more money if there is no clear, there are no clear evidences to show that you're doing a great job, right? So at this point now, we're going to tackle strategies for long-term growth. And I already started to mention a bunch of these, but just to go over them again: grow laterally, not just vertically. I mentioned collaborating with people at your level. You want to make sure that you're not constantly seeking, oh, who is a more senior person that I can link to, contribute to. Find out what your teammates are doing. What are you working on? The person doesn't even have to be in the specific business unit that you're in. Or how can I contribute to the work that you're doing? What's one thing that you find challenging recently that you think a second pair of eyes might help you with? And then that helps you get some more experience with doing certain other types of things, right? You want to collaborate with people so that you can contribute to the work that they are doing, but also learn something new, something that you can take into the next step of your role within the same company or into your next role elsewhere. Stay close to the business, so understand the company's goals, and where design can create leverage, you have to get, if not as obsessed, because you're not the owner of the company at the end of the day, if not as obsessed with like what the mission and vision is, at least understand it to a point that, you know, if somebody asks you, how does your work impact what we are doing here? You have an answer to give them, right? And you can always use that to make suggestions, ask questions, and the like. Already mentioned, be visible and let your visibility be impactful. Don't just be visible for visible sake. Don't be visible for the person that unmutes their mic during meetings to nitpick work that other people have done in an unconstructive way. You just want to ask them silly questions. You're not suggesting anything that will be useful or help them, and all of that. But then also talk about your work, right? I'm working on something. Find ways to slip it into conversations in a way that's not obnoxious. Oh, I'm doing XYZ and I encountered that problem. What are some ways that you think I might be able to address this issue? You've told that person or that group of people, this is what I'm working on. This is how it's going to impact the business if I'm able to succeed at it. And then you've also succeeded in bringing them into the process, getting their insights. So you're getting additional resources to help you out in doing your work. And then lastly, advocate for your growth. Like I said earlier, and Debbie has said earlier, that your diary is to become your best friend, right? And that is your ticket to having important conversations about moving to the next step in your career. So now our last practical session. Again, if you've already gone to the website, you have probably already downloaded this checklist. But for those who haven't, we have prepared a first 90-day checklist for you to help you with the first few months of your role. And you can keep this with you and go back to it from time to time, just to ensure that you are optimizing those first 90 days for, you know, the best that you can get out of it, and setting yourself up at the company for a grand time. Now, at this point, we will segue into questions. So we've received a bunch of questions. There are some that we received earlier that we've not been able to address, both within the chat and on our Slido link. So this is the point where we go into all these questions and actually take our time to go through them. So if you have questions, this is a good place to start sending them in so we can pick them one by one for answering. Okay.
Yeah. I think since we started on Slido last time, we can start on the chat this time. So I'll just scroll up and start reading questions that we got during the portfolio session. But yeah, I hope this session has been helpful to you guys so far. Feel free to share in your final questions as we wrap things up in the next few minutes. But yeah, first question. What do you do in a situation where you're asked about something you can't do yet during an interview? Do you tweak your past experience or tell a cute little lie? Ariyike, I'll let you take this one.
All right. So this is always a very interesting one. Interesting because I get asked this quite often, surprisingly. And one thing that always helps me in these kind of scenarios is, number one, emphasizing the fact that this is something that I haven't had the opportunity to try yet in the way that it is being described, but I am nothing but enthusiastic about getting the opportunity to learn and, you know, become good at it. That's the first thing I do. So I'm not telling anybody any lies about what I can or can't do, because yeah, that's the fastest way to get into trouble. The second thing I do following that is to highlight what are some other things. I refuse to believe that there are things that, you know, you absolutely have no context on, no way of knowing how to do it, that they will ask you during these interviews. Chances are you have done something similar, something that can be a useful, transferable skill to what they're asking you. So in those few moments, so something that I do during interviews is that I ask for time to think. I feel like a lot of us, in an attempt to not waste the recruiter's time because we're so grateful for the opportunity that they've given us to speak to them, that we just rush into giving answers without ask for time. If they're not open to giving you time, then that's already a red flag. The interview is as much for you as it is for them. You're also interviewing them. If they have a problem with you saying, oh, can you give me 2 minutes to structure my thoughts? That's already a red flag. That's a problem. You don't want to work at someone like that. So you ask them, oh, can you give me a few moments to collect my thoughts to answer this question? And then take that time and think back to a time when you've done something similar, or something that's, opportunity to think is something that if you do it, I don't think anybody would reject you asking for the opportunity. But think back to a time when you've done something like that before, and oh, have you ever built a design system by yourself, or have you ever worked on a design system? For example, that's the question they've asked you, and they're like, how would you work on tokenization, blah, 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 etc. You've never done design systems before, right? But you've worked on other screens. You've worked on screens that use buttons. You utilize the number of things working on those screens. What can you think of from your past experiences? You know that, okay, for any good product to work, from a UI perspective, there needs to be a level of uniformity in terms of the elements that are used. So the buttons on your onboarding screen should not look different from the buttons on your settings page. It has to be uniform. You know that, for example, it needs to be modular enough that your buttons should work on mobile, but then they should also work on desktop. These are things that you have in your mind. So you can start saying, oh, I haven't worked on a design system before. I've never been actively part of a team working on that. But something that I do know is that I have worked on products where it involved creating uniform, standardized systems for interfaces. And I know how to do that. I know how to ensure that there is consistency from screen to screen, even though I was not an active part of creating that. I know how to ensure that my work meets certain accessibility standards from the perspective of the tokens and components that I'm using. There are ways to answer it without telling a lie about what you can do or what you've done before, while still staying true to like what you actually know how to do. So I hope this answers the question.
Yep. And I think a third point I'd add there is, be explicit about not having done it before. Explain things that you've done in the past that are similar, but also speak about what you could hypothetically do if that project was given to you. So yes, you haven't built that design system before, but if you were to build it, this is how you'd approach building it. You'd first take an audit of existing screens and components and things like that. But it's also fine to talk about your hypothetical of what you will do in that situation. Okay, next question. What is the best way to start the journey as a product designer with almost no knowledge and experience? I think a quick answer to that is to just start. One thing that I think for Ariyike and I, we both did not go to school for design. We went to school for computer science, discovered design, and had to self-teach our way into becoming product designers. I think one thing that worked for us is to just start by doing. Like, we did a lot of practice, just get your hands, get a feel for what it takes to design, what are the good practices, what are things to look out for. And we were not, I think our first few designs were actually not even building case study projects for our portfolios. We did that later on, yes, but like we actually had co-working sessions where we'd sit in the common space, pick a design on Dribble, and our goal is just to replicate that design. Literally, if they had a gradient, how do you achieve a gradient? They have corner radiuses, how to create corner radiuses. that taught us a lot on getting familiar with design tools. It taught us a lot on like design best practices. There were reasons we liked specific designs we liked. So it allowed us to see what those reasons were. Oh, they used a bit more white space than I have used. Sometimes it will mean measuring the space they use and applying it to the version that we're recreating, to the point that by the time we're done recreating that design, we can't tell the difference between what the original was and what our new design is. And so that helped us build our skill in the tool, build our skill in best practices for design, and ultimately led us to learning by force, because if we're trying to achieve a gradient on Figma and we can't do it from that design we've seen, we'll go on YouTube and search how to achieve a gradient on Figma. And so that teaches you, but having something that you're trying to do forces you to learn different aspects of design. I'd also say just staying connected with people, resources, communities that will help share design knowledge. So we joined a lot of communities. We discovered there aren't enough communities for designers in Africa, so we started our own community. And yeah, I think we also just became vocal about what we were interested in, and people started sharing resources our way or connecting us to different people. Those are a few short answers. I know we have a few questions, but Ariyike, is there anything quickly you want to add to that?
You've said it all.
All right, I think this next question is perfect for you. If you do more than one type of design or art, how should it show on your portfolio? I know you do illustrations and product design, so how should it show? I know you touched on this as well.
Yeah, so I actually really love this question because I am somebody with a lot of interests. And I like to tell people that I have my main life and then I have my side quests. So usually when I even introduce myself to people, I don't tell them, oh, I'm a product designer. I just say I'm a designer, because today I could tell you I was illustrating something and tomorrow I'm designing earrings. Next tomorrow, I'm doing some graphic work. But to answer this question, so if the portfolio is specifically for a product design role, and that's the first question you need to answer, like what is, because other types of design have their portfolios. Illustrators have portfolios. For example, I have an illustration portfolio, right? And at some point I had a graphic design portfolio when I used to do a lot of graphic design work. And I still have my product design portfolio. So the first question to answer is, what is this portfolio for? If it is a product design portfolio, then the chief work that should be featured like prominently is your product design work, right? But the way to incorporate other things is some of what I've mentioned. If you're an illustrator, illustrate your own icons, illustrate your images. Instead of putting a picture of yourself in real life on your website, draw yourself and build your portfolio around that drawing of yourself. Add in, little decals on the page, fill up your white space with stuff that you've done. These are interesting ways to add that in. My portfolio is currently offline right now because I am in the process of updating it. But when it was online, if you had visited it, you would see that I had a little section where, because I'm someone that really enjoys music and I like to illustrate all my playlist covers, right? So I had like a nice little link and I was like, if you love music like me, these are some of my favorite playlists with cover illustrations done by me, right? And then I have other sections in it, like you have an about section on your portfolio where you can put these things in. Oh, other places you can find me on the internet. Here I am on Substack, where I have a blog that I write about fashion design, because this is something that I also do. And then add like a little image that can show people like a snippet of that kind of design that you do, if maybe fashion design is something else that you're interested in. So there are ways around it. You can just carve out a section of your portfolio where you specify some of these other designs. Bonus points if these are things that you can actually apply to your product design work. It would be fantastic, because with graphic design, for example, if that's something that you do, you can tie it in and say, like, if you have already a story that's going, maybe in your portfolio story that you're telling, you've cast yourself as a superhero of some sorts. And so far you've told us, oh, these are the ways that I have been saving lives and changing situations. And then you give us your portfolio projects, and that fits into your story. And then you get to the graphic design section, and then you can check and be like, when I am not out fighting fires and saving people from burning buildings with my product design skills, you can find me on the other side of the internet, building out, I don't know, maybe something like party posters for people to wind down and have a good time, and then hyperlinking a couple of interesting posters that you've worked on, if that's a thing that you do. Their interest, like, just try to think about your life like a project in this scenario, and like, what are the different parts of the project and how do they connect, and just think of how to align them. Yeah, if this person would like more answers, feel free to message me on LinkedIn and we can workshop something from there. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I'll read out the next question. In my current role, I'm the only designer, so I handle product design, user research, and also support PR, social media, and graphic design, even though my background is in computer engineering. I'm passionate about product design, but wearing all these hats is overwhelming and pulls me away from where I want to grow. How can I navigate this situation while staying employed, but still positioning myself for the career I actually want? I think this is a great question. I can understand the frustration with having to wear multiple hats, and I think that's the case a lot of designers face in our context where design is only becoming a thing now. There aren't a lot of companies with a lot of designers, so we mostly have to wear multiple hats. I'd actually recommend, my first recommendation will be to play this as a strength. One of the last things Ariyike spoke about in thriving in your new role is becoming a T-shaped designer, where you're not just growing vertically in your skill and in your craft as design, but you're growing in other areas that will be complementary towards your skill as a designer. So you're learning about data and how to apply data into the things you design. You're learning about product management and how to apply that. And so I would say, in how you phrase it to like the different companies that you're trying to reach out to, phrase it as the fact that you're growing as a T-shaped designer. Like, yes, I'm great in design, but I've also had the privilege of leading research efforts and product management efforts and marketing efforts, basically, to drive the product, which has given me multiple different lenses that I approach my design process with. I approach my designs not just as a designer, but as someone who thinks about how will this design be marketed to the ideal user. Or I also think about, as a product manager or as a user researcher, what are the types of questions or feedback we're getting from users that can be incorporated into this design. So you can leverage it to tell a really good holistic story. And I would say in the other tasks that you're being asked to do, focus on learning the things that will apply or that will be cross-transferable to your role as a designer. So I've also had to wear multiple hats before, where I played research, design, and so on. And down the line, with 6 years of experience, it has worked in my favor because now I'm still doing user research tasks in my current role as a designer, but I'm doing them so much more efficiently because I've done research before, because I was the only one there to do it. And so it will still pay off. I think the things that you've mentioned right now are all things that will pay off to make you a better designer. I'll pause and see if Ariyike has any thoughts as well.
I don't have additional thoughts to share.
All right. But yeah, leverage that to your strength. Just emphasize the fact that you are becoming a T-shaped designer, and I think that's a good thing. So also find ways to highlight that on your portfolio. You can mention that as one of your strengths. You've built 0 to 1 products. You've worn multiple hats for the same product, and it has given you multiple perspectives in how you approach solving problems for users. Okay, next question.
I actually have a question here that was sent to me directly that
Got you.
I got to answer, in case the person is still here and hasn't left the call yet. And this person says, with someone who has no experience in design, when building your portfolio, is it still advisable to niche down? My short answer is yes, but maybe not immediately, because you have no experience at this point. So you still have a bit of space to do like your exploration. But this doesn't mean that now you have no direction, or there are no guardrails to surround your work for your portfolio. So I'm going to I've taken a few notes here. So if you see me looking off camera, that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at my notes. Because what you're trying to do is tell people that, you are a product designer that does XYZ. So you want to start from somewhere, right? A larger thing you can do is maybe start with mobile design. That can be your niche. Oh, for the first few months, I'm building only mobile apps. I want people to know that I can design mobile apps. That can be your niche, right? Or it can be web apps, because you're trying to currently explore how to design for web and desktop use. That can be your niche, right? At this point, you've not done enough to be able to say, oh, I am da 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 da. There are also other niches that you can explore that maybe are not necessarily related to industry. And I've mentioned one of these before. One of those is accessibility, right? Some people are accessibility focused UX designers. And I know that sounds strange, because as designers, accessibility is something that we should all be interested in and incorporate into our day-to-day work. But there are people that are more interested in it than others, and they take special attention to it when they are working on projects. So if you are somebody like that, accessibility can be your niche, where you have projects that are focused on different industry. You could have a fintech app, one for hospitality. You could have a learning app, but the common thread across all of them is that they have a special focus, special attention that you've paid to accessibility within these apps, and then you do your best to shine a light on that piece. That would be your niche. So yeah, that's some way you can consider, just two ways that you can consider niching down at that level in your career. Yeah. Another niche, actually, this just came to my mind. Your niche can be that you build for emerging markets. So that sounds very fancy and nice when I say it, but it literally just means I'm a designer that lives in Lagos, Nigeria, and I have only ever designed for people that live in Lagos, Nigeria. And Lagos, Nigeria is considered an emerging market, right? Because it is not as developed as other places in other parts of the world. But you see how it sounds? Like, it sounds very, ooh, I designed for emerging markets. And like, you can really sell that and have multiple types of apps for emerging markets. That can be your niche. Yeah.
Yeah. And it scopes you down, but it also opens you up, because think of a Google or a big tech company wanting to come to emerging markets to set up shop. They are looking for experts in emerging markets. So it doesn't mean it rules out other types of companies. All right, so we have 8 minutes left and still a few questions. So we're just going to do quick fire rounds of trying to answer as much as possible. Next question. I hear a lot about having a niche, but most job descriptions I see almost always want a jack of all trades. How do you handle it? I think there's a difference between them stating like a range of different things in the job description versus wanting a jack of all trades, because chances are whichever company is hiring you works in a particular industry and not all industries. So that alone is a niche. They might want a designer that does research, interviews, UI design, prototypes, stuff like that. But those are all core skills to you being an effective designer. There is still a niche in terms of the industry or the type of products they're building. Are they B2C or B2B? Are they building mobile first or web first? What industry are they operating in? So there are still different niches. I would say try to differentiate scope of work from niche. And when we say niche, we're just talking about the industry. We don't a fintech company wants to hire someone who will thrive in that fintech space and so on. So yeah, maybe just like the way we think about it can be changed. All right, next question. You said something about highlighting your impact in numbers for people that have only done personal projects, and I mean just projects that they thought of themselves. How can they go about this? Ariyike, do you want to answer that or should I?
Maybe you can take that on.
Okay. So I think if it's just a personal project, what was your design process for that project? One thing you probably did was to get feedback on the design to see how you can iterate on it and make it better. After you've made it better, you can go back to those same people or to a different set of people who were your ideal target users to get more feedback. So in as much as you might not be able to quantify it from a company perspective, you can set up data collection tools to be able to create your own data, whether that's surveys, additional usability tests, or additional usability tests or even prototype tests and so on to collect that data, collect that initial reaction. What were their first 5 seconds impression like? What questions did they have? And you'd be able to tell, in my first design, 10 out of the 20 people I interviewed were confused about this part of the flow. By the time I updated the design, that number dropped to 2 out of 20 people. So I reduced the confusion by X%. So there are different ways to be creative about collecting data, but I'd say going back to users and testing your final solution is a way to create that data that you can talk about. Okay.
Here about someone that says, what roles can I apply for if I want to focus on research as a designer instead of user interfaces? And what can I present in my portfolio for these roles? So there's something called a UX researcher, and I think that's what you should be looking for when you apply. So you're looking for UX research roles, which is something that you find in some companies. It is not a common role. It's not as common as product design, but there are companies that hire user researchers. We have quite a few of them at Moniepoint where I work. And what you present in your portfolio is case studies as well. But you want to focus on problem and process of gathering data and what you were able to uncover from the data and the resulting solution. So it's very similar to a product design portfolio. I think the main difference would be that you're not actually showing like your screens or like iterations that you're making to screens. You will just show other things like your process of collecting data, testing with users, what processes do you use for gathering that data, and how you test and all of that, and how well you know how to analyze data and present your findings and insights. Yeah.
Awesome. Are there any other questions from your end?
I'm looking through.
Okay, I
Someone
see
said
one
it's
here.
appropriate to ask for feedback after a rejection via LinkedIn. What's the best way to do it? How should I handle no response or negative feedback? I'm not sure. Is this a rejection to a job application or a rejection from what?
Yeah, I guess rejection to a job application, that's how I think about it.
You don't have shame here. They've already rejected you. The worst that will happen is that they don't answer you again. If you think you need feedback, ask for it. Obviously, you do it in a professional, kind way. Right? Get people to read the message that you want to send to them over for you, get them to proofread it for you, but you don't get any prize for not trying. So the least you can do is to at least send the email, send the message, and see what you get back from there.
All right. There's someone here asking, there are law students currently interested in tech and product design. They're learning product design at alt school, but have no prior knowledge before now. What should my next step be? after the course? Additionally, how can I apply what I've learned so far to my current situation and where I am right now? I'd say after the course, I think we already answered this question. Start practicing. Like, you need to develop those skills. You need to make sure that your designs are pixel perfect. So start practicing, start building your portfolio case studies. How should you apply what you've learned so far? I think go to that link that we shared, download those checklists, and start refining your positioning as a designer. Update that portfolio, make sure your case studies are compelling, apply the job application strategies we've shared, use the interview guide we've shared to create your own interview guide. And then when you land the job, follow the 30, 60-day checklist to make sure that you're able to thrive and stand out and, pass probation. Yeah, there's someone who asked if they started as a UX researcher intern, but their passion is UI UX. I think the summary is, will highlighting both UX research and UX design skills in my profile or resume be seen as confusing or beneficial to the hiring managers? I think it's beneficial. Those are complementary skills. And so yeah, it's actually great to see someone who has research skills and design skills because they're hiring a 2-in-1 person. I also have after my computer science background, I also got an MBA recently. And so I actually highlight that I have a tech, design, and business background, and I use those 3 different lenses to inform how I design products. And so yeah, I think make that your strength, make that your niche. Yeah.
Alrighty. I think at this point, we would just like to start winding down. Thank you to everybody for participating actively. I can see that the tech team is ready to take us to the end. But before we hand over to her, we'd just like to let everybody know that it was really great getting to do this, getting to prepare this workshop for you guys. And we just hope that you have found it very useful and very helpful. If you would like to ask further questions, additional questions, both Debbie and I would be happy to answer on LinkedIn. So feel free to look for us, Debbie Adejumo. For me, you find me at Ariyike Adetimehin on LinkedIn. We also want to share that we will, in the coming weeks, be sharing more insightful, impactful information like this on something that we're starting very soon. And I'll let Debbie give a little more information about that and where to hopefully watch for more information.
Yeah, I think you basically covered it. It's just stay tuned. We're really glad to have shared. We hope that you found this valuable. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, feel free to reach out. I think where to find it when we do launch that. We want to continue sharing and helping others. But yeah, I think Wetech is a great community to be part of to get access to that information. But like we said, you can also reach out to us personally. But yeah, feel free to download those workbooks. I think those are great starting points. If there's anything you would have liked to see but didn't in this session, also reach out to us to let us know that, because I think that will help prepare for future sessions, or even something you'd like to see going forward. I think it will be great to just have that knowledge. But yeah, thank you guys. This has been great. I think we will hand over to the Wetech team now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Ariyike and Debbie, for this insightful session. It was very much needed. And as we get to wrap up, I would like for us to capture these moments with you all here. And thank you all for staying tuned. We had like 40 plus attendees, about 33 remaining, and I'm glad you all stayed tuned. So if you are comfortable, please turn on your video and give us your best smile. We would like to take a quick screenshot to remember this amazing community of designers here, product designers, whichever level of designers you're in. We'd love to see your face and just take a quick screenshot. So if you're ready, please turn on your cameras and just give us your best smile. Just wait for a few more people to turn on the cameras before we get ready. Okay. Okay. Okay, just a few more people, just turn on your cameras. If you can get at least everyone's cameras on, that'll be good. Grace, Christine, Sharon, Adesola, Jane, Aisha, Hannah, Dari. Yes. Okay, okay. Anyone else before we wrap up? Okay. I can see it. Thank you, thank you, Mercy. Thank you, Aisha. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's just take a quick screenshot. Please smile. Make sure you're smiling. Make sure you're not frowning. Okay. Okay, I'm taking one now. Yeah. Okay, another one. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you again for being here today and for sharing, asking great questions and being a part of this conversation. It's been almost 3 hours and I'm glad you stayed to the end and I hope you enjoyed the session. Please make sure you download, use the link provided in chat and download the available resources they provided. And you can also reach out to the speakers if you have any further questions or need to get more information from them. You can find them on LinkedIn. It's very accessible, or you can also reach out to them through the available means they shared. Yes, and we'll be sending out a feedback email, so keep your eyes on your inbox for that. And we hope to see you in our next session. Please stay connected with us at Wetech on Instagram, Wetech Official on X, and on LinkedIn. And you can join our Slack community through the link in our bio. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And we hope to see you in our next session. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.